Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Onepeg. I had the pleasure of being able to sit down by invite from G0at to sit down with Veritas and a guy that goes by the name of Mirage of Penguins. Mirage of Penguins is a veteran of the anti-cheat scene. He's been an anti-cheat developer for a number of years. Most notably, most recently, he was the product lead, the head of the team that was developing the Vanguard anti-cheat software that is used in Riot's Valorant game. Most widely regarded as the best, I guess, anti-cheat rated at the moment of any game out there. Now, that being said, there are a couple of things in this before we get to the interview. First, we want to make sure that we respect the privacy of Mirage of Penguins. He does currently work still as an anti-cheat developer, although he doesn't work for Riot, which gave him a little bit more freedom than normal. However, in terms of trade secrets and things that are currently still being developed kind of behind the scenes or in secret to be able to combat the cat and mouse game that is ever ongoing between cheat developer and anti-cheat developer, unless it's a work that has been published somewhere, either in a periodical journal or on the internet as a blog post or a tweet someplace, there aren't specifics that could really be discussed. So this is more of a discussion of best practices, frustrations, kind of war stories, those kinds of things. Secondly, again, while he does still work as an anti-cheat developer, he did not feel comfortable with disclosing the company that he works for because of privacy concerns of himself and also just out of respect for his coworkers. I'm sure we all can understand that, right? And lastly, this was a relatively long discussion. For those of you looking for a TLDR, the basic idea is that anti-cheat is a tough business. These guys are very passionate about what it is that they do. They love what they do. They are constantly chasing after cheaters and trying to button up all of these exploits that cheaters find. They do end up kind of ranking the severity of cheat infractions and try to categorize the level of infraction and make sure that they take out the, I guess, worst of the worst first and work their way down the ladder. There were questions asked about server authority, what developers can do to try and help themselves in so far as detecting cheaters better, whether or not AI algorithms do everything that they say that they can do, whether or not machine learning is actually the future in terms of what people believe it to be, and in his mind, what it means to need larger and greater amounts of trust when it comes to your system and the amount of information, at least in terms of hardware identification, your system gives to the anti-cheat or to the developers insofar as allowing you to play ranked or even in tournament style play with different levels of hardware attestation. It's an actually very interesting conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it. Here's the interview. And one more thing before I forget. When the interview starts, what you'll notice is we're all kind of broken up into like a Discord phone call. However, G0at, who's up in one of the corners, had a little bit of a technical issue. So it's basically like his stream feed where we're all going to be like re-superimposed in a grid around his face where he kind of like sticks himself in. You'll see what I mean. But anyway, it all works. It's just like you'll see me laugh and then it is a little bit of a delay. You'll see me laugh again in like in his little corner or whatever, but you know, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, on to the interview. I hope you guys enjoy it.
Bro, it's the kernel level of the operating system. There's not really another way for me to phrase it. It's like, you know, like you run all the applications you run in user mode. Your games, I mean, some of them request administrator privileges, but they're still in user mode. The calls that I'll actually get into the calls later. So like most of the applications you make to determine to get any device information are making calls to an underlying Windows API from user mode. Like if I wanted to know what particular operating system you were running, what other applications are, even something as simple as like getting the process name by ID is a call that I make from user mode. I'm basically asking Windows to give me the answer to something.
So I guess stepping into the next most common question, I'm just going to get these out of the way because these are the boring ones. I'm just going to fire these off. Everybody, if you go and look at my YouTube comments when I ask questions for this and you go through forums, everybody complains about the level of privacy infringement by anti-cheats. Let's just go into that. Like, what is there any truth to that?
Well, first, you should probably. I mean, this is important to say. Like, the kernel level doesn't. I mean, it does. It doesn't really let us. A lot of those calls we can still make from user mode and receive reply. Like, we can still get a list of like. You can still get a list of like running processes. You could still get like all the things that like. All that can be done from user. Also, like a lot of the anti-cheat developers have been doing this for years. Like they don't really need a driver to make requests of information from the system. There's like that. The driver is more to confirm the integrity of those requests. Not. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with allowing us to gain a greater deal. There are some things that allows you to have a greater. Man, it's difficult to talk because you don't know what you can and can't say. But there are some things that it might give you like a small, greater amount of detail on. But that's not really the purpose of why so many of them want, or like why we found the driver to be necessary. It wasn't to increase the breadth of information we were getting. It was to ensure that that information hadn't been tampered with. Does that make sense? So,
Right.
so yeah, like it doesn't. That's what it's kind of not there for. We're not gaining. But to answer your question, that was mostly focused on the information that anti-cheats retrieve, like. And I'm mostly talking to my experience. We don't get like anti-cheats don't give a. They need to collect some information, and usually those like what they collect and even the retention periods of what they collect are like defined based on the risk of that information. So like, but it's actually very little. There's most of it's deleted instantly. Well, not maybe some of it's retained so that you can have evidence of a particular cheat. But it's very rare that there's like anything that's like even personally identifiable stuff is so risky. Nobody wants to hold on to it. So like we didn't. And yeah,
I think
I hope that answers the question. It's difficult to talk about.
Yeah, I think something that's related to this too is the idea that when it comes to privacy, some people are worried that like some foreign company that has a root level access is going to steal all my data, right? And whether or not that has any merit, obviously case by case basis. But then there's the idea that software having root level access could potentially be exploited to gain root level access.
Right, like the Capcom driver, right? That's what you're asking about.
I'm not talking about anything specifically, but just in general, one of the worries is that that essentially the software could be used as a vector for malicious software, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I mean right. So like if we I mean, first of all, I'm not speaking as a representative of any particular anti-cheat. I mean, I'm going to say that every 3 sentences.
No, it's fine.
But yeah, everybody does their due diligence to try to ensure that things like that can't happen. I know that we went through pen tests, internal and external, including external black box pen testing to determine if there were any vectors for that. We audited and audited again. It was like it. And there's also like the I mean, Riot themselves have a bug bounty program that again, there's articles that allude to this, but there's that tries to encourage when vulnerabilities are found that, and some of them like the payouts can get pretty big. But yeah, we try to take that kind of thing seriously. If every anti-cheat does. I hope that's a good enough answer. There are some famous things where that happened, by the way. We're and from us, from the anti-cheat perspective, we would identify those drivers and actually in some cases prevent them from loading, because we knew that those had been compromised, and we would identify the cert associated with that driver and not allow it to load. And that was largely to make sure that somebody couldn't use that exploit to operate at the kernel level. So yeah, we're familiar with it, and we tried to, everybody tries to do their due diligence to make sure it's not. It's like a number one concern since, well, it's become less of a priority as like more ways to check the integrity of services have been released by Windows, I guess I should say. But like it was like our primary concern when I've been developing anti-cheats in the past. One of our top 3 concerns.
Right on.
So just walk me through
you have no idea how hard it is for me to talk about anti-cheats, having made a few, and I can't talk about any of those anti-cheats.
Yeah. It's like, tell me about the movie that you can't tell me the plot, anybody who's in it, anything that goes on, where it takes place.
This is why like it's difficult. That's why everybody who asks to do this says no, because they can't really do it.
If you can like generically just walk me through like what is a normal day for an anti-cheat developer? If you're not in a management position, like what are you doing on a day-to-day basis, just generically?
I mean, it looks different at different studios. I don't think everybody does it exactly the same, but a lot of it, I mean, layer 1 is like intelligence. So like we have reports of players that are cheating. A lot of those times, like sometimes it's like specific accounts organized by the frequency of reports they've received or a velocity of reports like over time. Usually looking at these accounts like behaviorally to determine if they are cheating, and then you're A/B testing to see if like the existing anti-cheat solution is detecting that like whatever they're using. And And like this is if you're kind of on the ground floor. We have
Right.
so like once you get into the more mature anti-cheats, they usually have like an anomaly detection pipeline that can like bubble up cases for review. Sometimes those are accounts, and sometimes they're like reports that or like intelligence that has been gathered from the community, things that appear in unknown cheats for whatever reason. But like exploits that have been made available, and then you're just testing that against the existing anti-cheat to confirm that it's detected. And if it isn't, then you prioritize a new detection method based on, that's the basic loop, based on the severity of that exploit. But just as often as a case actually fits into the carefully architected loop you have for review, there's one that like just gets escalated extracurricularly and gets prioritized way more than, whatever you considered the most relevant thing at the time. I think most product leads are pretty familiar with that process, but yeah. The CEO shows up and is like, "Hey, this is number 1 now." It's like, "You're right, it is." And it's like it's some cheat you already detect, and it's just like some guy's kid is using it or something. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of like, and then like you go to lunch, and then you
Get right on it, boss.
It's like you're constantly modifying this thing. So like a lot of anti-cheats are less, they're probably not even the same product. If you look in 3-month slices, enough of the code base has changed that it's you could almost call it a new thing, but it's changing constantly. It has to. And so a lot of anti-cheats have kind of become less like a specific thing and more like a pipeline for delivering detections to clients running the games. And often they're updating like hourly, like they have to. That's kind of the nature.
So let's back out a little bit. Tell me, like, what do you think the role of, I would categorize what Vanguard does and BattleEye and, any of the easy anti-cheat. I'd categorize those as like software anti-cheats. I don't know what you would call them generically, but
you mean like, so I call them host so it's
okay. So yeah,
you're running on the host that's running the game.
Sure. Okay. So they're host anti-cheat, software. So what role overall do you think these, programs play in the fight against a cheater? Like, would you say it's a 50-50 between the developer and the anti-cheat? Or do you say it's a 30-70? Where would you kind of like put?
When you say developer, do you mean the engineers that are working on the anti-cheat, or the developer?
So the developer of the game. So like, obviously the game's going to have their own way of detecting people and banning them with reviews and other things. Like, where would you place the anti-cheat in that kind of algorithm?
Well, the responsibility that the game developers largely make sure the architecture can't be exploited. So, and when I say architecture, I mean the way the game and the server communicate, right? Some people refer to this as like server authority, but really what it means is that like if the client says something, the server has the final say on whether or not that particular thing was accurate. Like this sometimes shows up in like a player calling a game function and eventually that game client will say for example you're like let's use a silly example. You're like casting a spell in any MMO or something. Eventually, your client is going to compile a packet with some parameters that tell the server that your character casted that spell. But way before that, you're going to have a function that like kind of takes parameters from the user to eventually call like the network layer and send that to the server. A lot of a lot of cheating back in the day is just finding where that function is and then passing goofy parameters to it. Like say the first parameter was just like my player ID. What would happen if I tried to cast somebody else's spells? Well, it turns out that works, like, right? Because the server doesn't bother to confirm that the person that the client that the traffic was received from was the player was the same player that casted the spell. Or you could cast spells that you didn't have, or just cast them off cooldown, right? Because there's no server validation for that request. So that's the game developers. That's what they're supposed to do, right? Prevent all exploits. And when I say exploits, some of them look like that, but some of them look a little bit different. Like maybe they actually, rather than calling the function, they get even lower. And then this is where you're kind of really screwed. When players can have understood enough of the game's packet protocol to send compile requests to the server manually, because then you've got none of your client validation. It's all been stripped out, and they can just send requests completely unvalidated by the client and audit your server. And what that's usually going to do is it's going to crash the server, but eventually they're going to find something. And what that looks like varies. You can find videos of it occurring in games I've worked on. But yeah, eventually they find something, and it ends up looking goofy. And anyway, so it's game developers' responsibility is largely to make sure that like the architecture of the game and the client is secure. And once it is, and once the server is authoritative in most cases, and they've caught all the exceptions of bad parameters and bad, even not just like type that the types confirm, but like nobody can do anything like submit other ID, like the ID of another player, or like spells they don't have in my previous example. Once all that's validated, then you have the second layer, right? That's where players start to aimbots. League of Legends would call it scripting, but it's player automation. It's like automating the execution of specific things within the game, and that's where Anticheat comes in, right? It's not like once you've created a game loop and you've secured that game loop, Anticheat kind of sits on top of that to make sure that everybody that is playing is doing it legitimately. And
so
actually,
let me just so I can see if I'm following, so people in the audience can kind of like keep up. So like an example would be like in Tarkov, there was a lot of fly cheats where people were literally flying and exploiting the ability to break physics, or they were going underneath the ground and doing this like dolphin dive, right? And so that all got fixed. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it was probably all on the game developer side of things. And then there was this one where they found out that when you fall off of a elevated platform out of a window, you always land on like one leg, and you break one leg or one leg first. So they basically exploited this like memory algorithm or something where they were able to make the character get stuck in this like half animation with one leg down. They call it the stanky leg. And it turns out during the coding process, they figured out that like you can't die during that fall, like right at the moment of the fall, the way the game's programmed. So the cheat guys figured out that like, okay, if we force you to be in the stanky leg like position, you can't take any damage unless it's to your legs. So it was their way of like preventing damage.
How you end up into that. I imagine like the game loop is like checking for that state, like kind of like outside of where it's making modifications to aid. So if you're in that state, it just skips a bunch of the remaining of the server. This is a guess. So it's probably skipping a lot of the other server logic, and they just kind of figured that out.
And so following what you were saying, this is an example where it's like, BattlEye is not going to help you here. It's going to help like maybe prevent a software from being detected that's in the background that's sending these requests. But at some level, like that little exploit is kind of more on the game developer side, right? And then they have fixed it, right? They have fixed it since from what I understand, but
it is on the game developer, but it's not completely fair, right? Because that implies that every game studio has the resources to reproduce that cheat, right? If the game developers themselves don't have anti-cheat specialty, they're going to have to see something like that and guess, like I just did. Like finding a copy of the cheat and determining which functions it's explicitly using would be like, that would fall under the purview of an anti-cheat engineer, right? And one step back, you said BattlEye can't help at all. Well, anti-cheats can help. They could identify the software that they're using to do that, for example, because you can't do that in the client normally. So if the client's been manipulated, there's some like integrity stuff you can do to determine whether or not the file on disk is the one it's supposed to be. But cheaters don't really do that anymore. So but they can detect that like something simple like a DLL has been loaded or something like that. And then they could make that particular piece of telemetry available to the developers so that like they know how to size the problem. Like 10 players are using this exploit, here they all are, or like things like that. So anti-cheat can help, but they can't fix it. And no, you should never rely on an anti-cheat for something to prevent something like that. All they can do is alert you when it's occurred and kind of point you in the right direction.
Is it common practice for anti-cheat development teams to go to the market and obtain like those pieces of software and then kind of like go through the reverse engineering process and be like, oh, so that's how they do it? And then,
yep.
Okay. So, all right. Because one of the questions that I got like most commonly when I was like asking, community people, like, what do you want to know? Was, well, why don't they just go and like buy the thing and then reverse engineer it? And I'm maybe they do.
That can get tough, by the way, buying stuff. Some cheating communities, in an effort to not have that happen to them, because this is a cat and mouse game forever. They force you to submit a driver's license with your Bitcoin payment, right? It can be really hard to acquire cheats from communities that are really, 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 really secular with user limits. like some of the aimbots for CS and all the other first person shooters, they're so like undetection is such a promise of their service that they protect themselves that way. It's going to be difficult to find where they even sell it. It's going to be harder to acquire a copy. There's going to be like you're going to have to get a new copy at a greater frequency. They're going to have anti-leak on it. Like even I'm going to have to pay for it seriously just to use it. Like they probably got better anti-leak than like, I don't know. I was going to use an example of a game, but they got anti-leak on the. It's difficult, right?
On a game out there.
On a game out there that I won't.
Like a popular video game, yeah.
Like something that you crack, right? But they got also anti-cheat engineers know how to make DRM, or just cheat engineers, or at least like they could probably make a decent one as long as it's only being attacked by a small subset of users. So it can be difficult to get a cheat, especially late in the game. Like
so I'll give you an example. As a user, I tried to use one that this guy I was shadowing, and they wanted like 2 forms of ID. They wanted a essay where you wrote it in English. You had to explain like your history of cheating and like why you're cheating and all this kind of stuff. And they want to interview with
what is that
video.
Like a college application process. What the fuck?
Cheat? Why do you want it?
It's easier to get your driver's license in the United States than it is to get a cheat. Like it's crazy. And
It's like a passport application.
Yeah, and then when you go to download it, you don't get the files. Like they don't give you a file. There's nothing. You have to. It injects like in real time. Like every time you load the game, it's downloading everything and doing it, and it's different every time. So it's not like there's just this file sitting out there. It's like, why don't you just load it up and see what's in there, And they can cut you off, at any time as well.
Yeah. And it's going to be even harder for even an anti-cheat engineer that does have a legitimate copy of that game to do the analysis necessary to determine what it's doing. Although, I mean, I've worked with some crazy kids in the past. I won't say any of them by name, but that would just be a Tuesday to them. Like,
Yeah, I think I know one of them.
Yeah, you might.
Go ahead, Onepeg. Like, you got anything? I've been too much.
So in that same vein, then you're talking about like things are incredibly hard to detect on the like, let's say software detection or like maybe behaviorist side of things. And then obviously now with things like ChatGPT and learning algorithms and all this other statistical analysis, people keep right. I know people keep pushing things like Fair Fight as a retail example of a potential solution where you start tracking statistics until the model that you've been working with eventually gets to the point where it feels like it's reliable enough to kind of take over and do the job. So my hope is that you could kind of comment to the effect of how well that has worked in your history and whether or not you see it like moving more towards statistical analyses. Because on our side of things, in like the Tarkov world, we've always kind of looked at it like, well, there's a guy flying through the air. Like, how do you not track the coordinates and just knock this dude out? Right.
Well,
and you know what I mean? So, and obviously we have no idea how it works on the other side of this. So that like shining light on that, I think would be a big help.
Yeah, so I've been like referring to things as layers, like the layer where the game is secure. You're talking about people flying through the air. That should typically be resolved by server-sided checks to the player's position. Even at the game's tick rate to confirm that they haven't moved faster than they should or that they're in a valid location. But okay, and then you have an anti-cheat, which can actually like explicitly detect things. This allows you to label the behaviors that you're seeing in game with the explicit, with the evidence that somebody has cheated. And from that, you can start to craft like some anomaly detection on top of that can start to predict whether or not somebody would be cheating in a particular window based on the behaviors exhibited in there and where the model has been trained. It's often trained on a set that's generated from typical anti-cheat data, and so it has its place. It does, but and this is mostly my experience. It's not like the end. It's not like the end all. Like it's not like, and I know
we fixed it.
Say, AI is going to replace all, but it just isn't there yet. It's not even that it isn't there yet. It's that I doubt it'll ever be complete enough because cheaters adapt so quickly, and even the most noble of gestures still got to find a way to get the heuristics in a way that they can like productionize to every game, and every game looks different. So it starts to like a lot of them have in some cases taken shortcuts where they're exfiltrating like heuristic information off the player's machine directly and off to another thing that isn't necessarily the game server, which is super easy to attack. I mean, it's like it's vulnerable to like replay attack. It's just difficult to get true behavioral information in a way that is like portable between games. But even if you're sitting on the server and you're in your game loop and you have sufficient audit telemetry to do, I don't want to give anything away explicitly, but let's say you're on the server and you do have like where every player is positioned, where they were looking, and in an effort to detect aimbots. That's still, even still, like players toggle them. It's really hard to know, like, even when you're labeling it on your own and getting it trained up.
And there's stuff where they don't just like aim at your head, like they have like a little bit of jitter and they'll hit you in the chest a couple of times. And
I do think that like it's getting better. And we were, in my past, we put a lot of points into that bucket and we were able to bubble up reports and things to review based on it. But then when you take action on a player, you still need to know. If I just went out and banned like who's the number one CSGO player right now? Does anybody know? I don't know. I don't play CSGO. But if I just went out and banned a pro player based on the results of a model and I didn't have proof, I don't know if that would fly. So like these things kind of work in tandem. Like you kind of need all pieces. You need a secure game, you need an anti-cheat, you need anomaly detection. And there's some like novel attempts at anomaly detection that are trying to solve some of those problems I was talking about, but like none of them are like completely there yet. They all require, at the very least, like anti-cheat developers willing to work with the inputs and outputs to tune them properly. What do you think of the AI? Necessitates anti-cheat. Go ahead.
The Waldo Vision AI stuff that's been floating around right now. What do you think of that?
I'm not optimistic. Well, it's because, again, like I said, they got to find a way to. I mean, you're on the user's machine, right? Like, also, I also saw, and I've only seen a little bit on Waldo Vision, but even if you're looking at a spectator client, or you're locked to the frame rate you're locked to the updates that the server received. Or if you're looking on a stream, you're looking at that information secondhand and only on the screen. And I've tried to do it and just for the credibility, I've tried to do this with player positions and with with the granularity necessary to actually, not just from screen data, but knowing where the person was and not having to exfiltrate it from the screen. And like it's still not perfect. So there's gonna and when you're looking at let's say a spectator client, or you're looking at a replay that's 60 FPS and the server's running at 128 or whatever, you're gonna have like updates that kind of came asynchronously, and some of those things are gonna be difficult to train on. Like that player sent an update kind of out, like say they sent a positional update and then they sent another one, or like where they were looking, and I guess the best way to phrase it, they're looking in a particular direction, and then they're updating on their client as frequently as a human would, but then you see them snap because there was a network issue and they only got that update the server only saw the direction, let's say half a second later. It's going to look like it snapped. And like it's going to be difficult to sort all that out. It's exceedingly difficult.
That's stuff that we would see
AI is like here.
And replay files for like CS 1.6 way back in the day. That's stuff that you would see all the time. You'd swear somebody was cheating because they, like, between one frame and another frame, they would snap 30 degrees to the right and headshot somebody. And it's like, wow, they have to be hacking. But really, they just had like way more information than to their own eyes than we saw in the replay file.
You're kind of limited to whatever the server tick rate is too. Admittedly, a lot of servers are very fast now, but this even still, you're limited by how frequently the client is sending updates, which has network latency, and especially when you're only looking for aimbots, like where that player was pointed. And oftentimes when you're looking at the machine, you don't have the in-world. It's difficult when you're looking at just like if you're just looking at a replay or you're just looking at a recording. And I don't know where Waldo Vision is actually trying to position itself, because I've seen a couple of things.
They seem to want everybody to submit recordings, like user recordings. It seems is what they're asking for.
That's where my skepticism comes from, because you're trying to world to screen everything in different resolutions and in different like across different resolutions across different games, and it's gonna honestly. I think it would be cheaper to just do anti-cheat. And that's a problem for like to just do it. Like I say, just do anti-cheat, but host anti-cheat is expensive. But getting something like that to work for all cheating, you can probably get like 30 to 50. I'm going to throw numbers out, but you can probably get a percentage of cheaters, the obvious ones, but all the closet ones, you're just going to need an anti-cheat for anyway. So like this product is providing like it's providing a supplement, but it's not the whole problem, right? And even when you go to train those models, you're gonna need an anti-cheat to label the cheaters at the granularity necessary to know when and they were and weren't cheating. So like these products necessitate an anti-cheat anyway. I'm not saying they're useless, because they're not. I mean, we use models. I've used models to start with before we had an anti-cheat. Even we're like, how many spells or whatever is somebody casting in some game, and you can use that to kind of get at, based on APM, where the highest risk users are. The problem becomes like delineating that from the pros. But anyway, behaviorally,
we've had our own share of those issues too. So like Dill Hero is a well-known streamer that it's statistically like in the upper like 1/10 of 1%. And he ended up catching a ban because of a clip that somebody submitted believing them to cheat, and it wasn't that. It was just really bad like desync between clients on the server. But that combined with his stats got him manually banned for a day. You know?
Yeah.
So
Even
that's the kind of stuff.
Make those mistakes. Like,
yeah,
if you're reviewing something specifically, I mean, I've also had models that have banned that like I was certain of in the training and test set, but they were missing like, they're missing that sample of like the upper echelon of that particular game. And then when we go to action on, even though it's 100% accurate in my test set, I was missing coverage of some demo within the game that performed differently, and they were seen as an anomaly, and I've banned them. I've unbanned them within hours, but I've done it.
Yeah. So on that topic, there has been a lot of controversy, especially recently, but over the last few years in Tarkov community, about false bans. And I know you don't need to speak on this specifically, but for a long time, the developers denied that there were false bans. But then as soon as a bunch of prominent streamers, there's been like probably half a dozen, were banned, they were basically forced to admit it. And then at that point, it kind of opens up the floodgates, right? Well,
this is where anti-cheat kind of comes in. You have the ability to review a player's history in that anti-cheat. So you can, just to know. So even if you are operating completely behaviorally, like you need the evidence to know. But yeah, sorry, I did kind of cut you off there. Was there more to that thought?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have a few questions related to that in particular. Like, what's the general attitude or philosophy in the anti-cheat community regarding like collateral damage, and like, is there a certain rate of false positives that are acceptable as long as the cheating's bad enough?
In an interview, you say no. No. I'll answer that. So, the answer is none. You don't want any. But inevitably, it happens, and it comes at you in unique ways, even if you try to anticipate it. People share accounts. There's one source of false you'll ban people that didn't even know it was them. That's actually probably the biggest case of false positives. And like, it wasn't me, it was my brother. How do I prove? Sometimes the burden of proof is on you if the account security isn't up to snuff, but other times it's just like the account took bad action, account is banned, right? Is that a false positive? Like, so a lot of things. So when you say false ban, it's not always like a result of a false detection. Sometimes like the account itself wasn't like, it was accessed by different people. And I'll say, like, you want none, but there is an acceptable amount where you're like willing to carve out an allowed number of false positives per, like, as a percentage. And like 4 nines is typically where I draw the line, because that means that all the one, like, through escalation, you'll have, as long as your review team is of sufficient size, you can create like a tiered system. And this is, again, at like really mature studios. Not every developer is going to be able to do this. But like,
when you say 4 nines, you mean like 99.9999%?
Yeah, one false positive for every 10,000 bans. Which is that's my personal, like, that's where I like allow a model to go out if it can achieve that kind of accuracy.
It's funny because from a player perspective, I'm okay with like 5 to 10% of the player population, like, maybe cheating a little bit here and there. Like, that's like, from a player perspective, I'm like, I can deal with that. I just can't deal with like half my raids,
Well, that's as a percentage of bans going
like,
out.
Yeah, I know, but it's funny when you flip the tables, like, where are like acceptability?
Well, that's another thing. We don't need to action every cheater, right? Some cheaters just don't do a lot of damage. If you cheat and you suck, like, and this again is mostly at mature anti-cheat teams, you can start to prioritize bans to kind of control the speed at which you, like, I'm not going to ban every cheat I detect instantly, right? Because then they're just going to issue an update, and then I'm going to have to detect that cheat. So like, to slow that down, we kind of play this little, and most cheaters are kind of familiar with this, trying to figure out if you've actually been detected or if like the behavioral model has detected you. And like a lot of that is this kind of back and forth where we're trying to deliberately occlude who's been detected by only banning the ones that cheat well. And I'm
The
not saying like,
ragers.
and like you just said, as a player, you don't give a shit if they suck at it, because you actually don't. Like if they were like a 20% win rate and the cheat puts them at 30%, we'll get them. Like they're detected, we'll ban them eventually. But the urgency of that ban is dramatically decreased. Like it wouldn't bother you, or it wouldn't bother a player as much. Like we'd notice that player would be reported less, or like it would lose more, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Like from a player perspective, I would be okay if 5 to 10% of my Tarkov raids had a cheater in it, and if they were constricted to not being super blatant and raging. You know, if they just were cheating, I don't like it. No one likes it, but I think that's a reasonable, like, this is, you know, we're in reality here, you know, and I think most people like don't realize that that's kind of like the, I don't know, like the kind of goal in a game like Tarkov, the way it's built, and the kind of game it is, and how people love cheating in it, and the whole, like, the market around cheating is just insane in Tarkov. I mean, people are spending $50 on an account per week. They're spending $60 to $80 a week on cheats, and they're spending another $30 a week for a spoofer. I mean,
what a cheater's
like
willing to do.
country clubs. Like, I could go golf at a really nice country club here near where I live, and it costs less. Like, it's crazy, you know?
Yeah.
One last. Oh no, go ahead.
No, please. They're just gonna make a joke. I've seen way more than that. I've seen cheats that cost $1,000. I've seen cheats that cost $1,000 per update. I mean, and it's not even financial hurdles like the ones you're talking about before, like show your driver's license, give us your social security number.
Damn, man.
Like,
dudes with disposable income don't give a shit. This is crazy.
Well, it's like, I mean, I you know, we won't get too into the motive. Maybe we will later, but like once you've cheated, it's difficult to not cheat. Like that becomes
addiction,
the way
man.
you engage with the game. Because once you're banned, you're also kind of like severed from like the community you were in, right? And so like the next time you engage, why not just cheat? It's one of the reasons like bans got to be like prioritized, because you know it's hard. It's really, really, really hard to reform a cheater. I mean, we know the explicit rate on that based on genre, and I can't share it, but it's really hard. When like I used to cheat, and I can't play first person shooters without cheating. I can't, because I can't aim. I never learned to do it. So like it's
dude. I mean, I've heard, like, listen, I've been in like Discord.
Stay out of my
chats,
raids, man.
And guys literally talk about guys literally talk about how like they're addicted. Like they'll even use the word. They'll just say it out. It's kind of like alcoholism or something. They can't go to a bar. They know, like, it's they know
Holy
themselves,
shit.
you know?
one more thing on the motivation.
You need like cheater AA. What the fuck?
There's like a talk out there where some of the other Vanguard developers went on to like sell a company or two. Anyway, they talk about like the motivations of cheating. It was actually like it was like part of the psychology, and there's like a couple of reasons. Actually, there's like 4, I think they say, but one of them is like for money. The developers themselves, like they probably originally had an interest in it, but like have now kind of evolved into a place where it's like their livelihood. There's others that are cheating for like they want to be seen as competitive amongst their friends. It's for like the social standing of being good at something. But then there's like this third class, which is like some of the cheat developers themselves just do it to break stuff and like have, you know, like for the attention of it, for the renown. Like, look at me, I'm breaking stuff.
Yeah.
I was that third thing, to be clear. Like, I was the narcissistic cheater where it's like, look at me, I'm breaking stuff. I'm the best, you know? And I think like
I outsmarted you, and yeah.
And I'm not. I mean, to be clear, I'm just like I was an idiot who found like the game had a PDB. I knew all the it was, anyway, it was mostly for the attention of it. And then there's like a fourth class, which is like I think they define it as like people doing it to get through grindier stuff. Like for them, it's like the automation of it is to like the economy of like
100 kills.
I ran into every one of those types of people in my video. I ran into people with like 0.5 KDs, which normal is like 1 to like 5, who were cheating. And they literally messaged me afterwards and said, listen, I just like, I run it every once in a while. I don't really kill that many people. I just want to get some stuff done. And then you have like the white hat people that are like, I'm here to like, I'm like this egotistical person that's here to save everybody. But it's crazy the amount of money that the developers bring in. I think some numbers are thrown around. People estimate that the ABS cheat that I used, that reseller was bringing in about $250K a month. So
fuck off.
and just an
Oh,
announcement
I
here.
believe it. The number of people that were using it, I believe that.
Yeah,
So-
and they've been running undetected for 3 years. So like they had a credible product. They had a pipeline. They had tons of resellers.
Dude's got Bentley money.
And the numbers like add up. Like I did the numbers. I saw the amount of stuff moving and stuff, and I think it's legit. Now, by the way, they did get shut down. Their servers got taken down. They switched to reselling a different product that got banned the day it went up. And then last week, Odin, the one that they switched to, got banned. So they're hurting. They also kicked me out of their Discord and stopped talking to me and banned me. We used to shit talk back and forth, and they stopped doing that.
Dude, it'll be
last
up in
week.
72 hours though, remember? Now it's 2 to 3 weeks. So yeah, they're gonna be on it though, bro. You don't worry, they're coming back with a vengeance, they swear.
Yeah.
It's it's hard to put an actual dent in like the profitability of a cheat without like having like what we'll talk about is like layer 4 or 5 in the layer analogy, but it's like eventually you have to like teams have to consider legal options. And it's not because you can't detect them or like you don't have the resources to, but it actually becomes cheaper to hire a lawyer to sue them. Like it eventually hits this jet fuel equation where it's like, okay, this person is now iterating and like they might be in an area where that vector is tenable. But I will say it can be really profitable. It depends on like the player base of the game, the strength of the cheats, like how good the fix is. And Tarkov, it sounds pretty good. It sounds, I mean, like again, but they're kind of like in that weird phase where there's still a lot of exploits available. I've been there as on both sides of the line of scrimmage, and it's difficult. But I mean, I don't know. I've seen people put up a lot. 250 is a lot. 250 a month. I've seen more, not much more, but that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that was really selling it for that one is undetected for 3 years. So you're building this community and this player base over years. And I think one of the things, the reason it did so well is it was pretty much an ESP only cheat. So it's not doing anything. It didn't have detectable features. So there's no speed hacking. There was no, flying and it didn't do anything to your aim. It wasn't an aimbot. So this thing just lasted so long. And I don't think they never detected it.
Is it wireframes and radar? That's all it gave you.
Well, that's actually, that's the allure. I mean, like that stuff is also like once you have that stuff, that's the hardest stuff to play without, seeing through walls. Like it's really hard because like the information of like talking about CS type game, first person shooters. It's like that's the whole point of the game at a certain point is the control of information. So it's like it is you just don't develop the skills, so you can't play without it. But anyway, trying to be undetected. The most expensive cheat I ever sold for guns was one that was it was like a humanized aimbot. And I like it was one person who offered me 30, and I hope they're listening because this would be really funny. But they offered me $30,000, $30,000, and this is in 2000.
Crazy.
And this was just because there were aimbots out there, but they wanted one explicitly that no one could see, like no one would know they were cheating. So I wanted the
only sub to it. They wanted to be the only one with it, right?
Only one with it. And I made it. I made it auto upgrading. I went through the whole thing. And I mean, they never charged it. I mean, I had the payment, half now, half later, and they used it for like 2 years, I guess. I never followed it. But yeah, I mean, that's the allure of like being undetected. You can either sell, there's like those two markets. You can sell something that's undetected, or you can sell something that's like an exploit en masse for the joy of it. I mean,
I fucking love these stories, dude. This is awesome.
Like
dude's like, yeah, made 30 grand. Fuck it.
So
I mean,
I gotta ask.
I hope the statute of limitations is up on that one. Yeah, it is for sure. It's been a long time.
So I got this comment a bunch. Why do you hate Linux people?
I don't hate Linux people.
They seem to think that you hate Linux people. Like that's what I got this comment. 100 comments at least. Why do you hate us Linux people?
I don't. But like, I think I can't even really comment on this because some of this goes back, but I'll say my personal opinion. Like the user base from a product perspective, like where we would, because what I wanted to offer was a spot where there was no cheats. And I couldn't do that there are some stuff, this was my opinion at the time, but like the only way I could do that was, and you look at the amount of users that actually play from Linux, how engaged they are. And some of them are like hyper fixated, like like they're really into like they're like computing and they're like power users, but like it's such a small subsect of the game and I know this is gonna make it worse, but most of them know how to install Wine. Like most of them know how to dual boot. Like they can totally.
They could totally go and run it Windows and run it the way that it needs to be done.
Because I have to have a shot. Like there's no if we have like back in the day, if we had a Linux client or we tried to like directly support that, we wouldn't be able to run the anti-cheat in that environment in the way we needed to confirm that players weren't cheating. Also, like it would like open a lot of doors to emulation and people manipulating the memory of the host instead of the memory of the virtual machine, and like we'd be running and we'd be virtualized. Like a lot of the ways to open the ability to run the anti-cheat on their preferred platform, which I guess is Wine in this case, would like allow other cheaters to emulate that path to manipulate the virtual machine, which is like something we just couldn't fight with. Well, at the time, we couldn't compete with. Like it would be too difficult to do. So when you look at it and you're like 0.00001% of the user base prefers that you do in like all, and it opens up like an entire avenue of cheating. You're like, that just isn't worth it for like the vision we want to achieve with this game. But it's not that I hate Linux users, because I don't. Like I mean, I don't use it anymore. I'm addicted to Windows, but like, yeah, I guess that's the best way to say it.
And in my, like, you know, I've never run a Linux machine, but my understanding is if you're running Linux on a computer, like you're not like a normal pleb. Like you have some understanding of computers. There's a reason you're running Linux. There's got to be a way for gaming that you can figure that out, how to dual boot and get off Linux, you know, to go game or something, you know.
Is that why a lot of games will forbid the ability to launch the game inside of VMware?
Yep.
Because of that, specifically because of like cheat issues?
Well, yeah, at the base layer, you can modify, you can have your cheat run outside. Like, okay, at the base, you can have your cheat run on the host, and then just, you know, you could have it screen read the virtual machine, and the anti-cheat's running in the virtual machine. It can see nothing that's occurring externally. You know, a kind of an analog is like if I pointed a webcam at my screen that was connected to a separate computer, right? You have no hope of seeing that. If you're running, if you're running on the host. In this case, it's one layer even further deep. If you're in the virtual machine, that anti-cheat has no hope of determining what's going on the host. But it can, with some techniques, determine that it is in a virtual machine and disallow it. Which is what I do remember a
Tarkov ban wave like a year ago or something where they like removed the ability to run virtual environments or something. And there were a lot of people who got caught up in that. But it was like, why are you running the game in a virtual machine? Like. I remember.
Yeah, they did that with Dark and Darker in the last playtest. The last playtest for Dark and Darker, they pulled that, and then people were like popping in chat, like, "Why can't I run it in a virtual machine?" I'm like, "Cause you're cheating."
Is there any reason to run a game in a virtual environment? Like, I'm just trying to think of like one reason you would.
I mean, like if you're on Linux would be a good example, or like,
yeah, I guess, yeah.
Or if you're like spinning up a massive bot farm and you need a reason to run 20 instances of the game or something. But so no, there's not too many legitimate ones, and with the exception of the power users, which is why we're like 99% of the use case for virtual machines is subterfuge, bots, or cheats. So we just can't support it, and it's not like literally we can't afford to support it. It's not like it's actually a pretty easy case to make internally, but it's hard to tell somebody that like your platform of choice isn't the one we can support right now.
Yeah, I mean, it is a war. Yeah, there's a war going on here. We have to pick our battles, and it's just not smart to spend so much resources on something like Linux.
Also, they're making fun of me for talking about virtual machines, and I say I'm talking about anti-cheaters. So there's a massive community. So I'll point out that also if you're in the host, you can just modify the memory of the VM. You don't have to like screen read. That's one of the vulnerability is that. Sorry, I was reading the comments on the thread. Yeah, you can just
be careful in there.
You can just cheat by like if like exploits in Tarkov would be possible by modifying the physical memory of the virtual machine instead of like needing to do like anti-cheat in the like you don't need or like attaching to the game client or whatever. Anyway, yeah, cool. It just makes cheating kind of trivial, and it kind of blinds the anti-cheat. That's the best way to say it at a high level.
Veritas, fire off. You got something. I know.
Well, I got.
I know. I'm talking.
I have like
so many things
over the
we
last.
could literally talk to you for 10 hours, but I'm trying to like. Okay, someone else ask.
All right, so to focus on something specific here. are things like replay systems or other crowdsourced solutions like CSGO's Overwatch, manual statistical analyses or like video clips, submissions, are any of those things ever acceptable for detecting cheaters and or manual banning? Like how much of
So
that
it's
is
like somebody
acceptable or
sitting there
reliable?
watching a spectator client and choosing whether or not to ban somebody based on just watching.
Yeah, so like either watching clips, looking at stats, either individually like you're a developer, or crowdsourced solutions like Overwatch where you have a bunch of people that say this is sus or this isn't sus. Like where's the threshold?
I think you can like use that to kind of direct like anomaly detection efforts, like having them kind of, or like kind of using that to determine which players are worth looking at. But I don't think you can issue bans on that kind of thing alone. And I think that it's twofold. One is like the latency problem we were talking about before, where you don't know when you're looking at a replay, even if it's an in-client replay, how frequently that particular client was sending updates. And if you're looking at a recording, you don't even know the fidelity that was taken at. Like it's difficult to know. Although like Overwatch, if we're talking about the CS system, also kind of they like exposed character models to the walls, so you could kind of like determine whether or not it was likely that somebody did have vision. And that's kind of an interesting use case because you're not relying on their performance data, you're relying on like their reactions to intelligence. That I think you can do, but for aimbots I don't think it's as applicable. It can definitely like help label aim events, like windows of aim vectors to try to like determine whether or not you should look at a particular player based on like how frequently that occurs across like a time period. And I know I'm being kind of vague. I kind of have to be. I'm sorry, guys. But
I wonder how
it is
subjective.
possible. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder how subjective that is because like if you are completely ignorant to shooters and tactics and you have like you never played them or you have no game sense, it's kind of like, you know, the saying any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. The idea that you can watch someone even in like Call of Duty kill cams, how you can see something and say that looks like cheats to me, and you can just be ignorant of the fact that that was a common spot or they heard you and you don't have decent headphones or your volume wasn't up loud enough or whatever the thing is. Where's the threshold between where someone like Shroud playing competitively will peak out at just the right time because they know the map timings and things like that? Like
I don't know the answer, and that's why I wouldn't trust other people to do it.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I feel like in those
that's a problem in Tarkov.
If it's really obvious, like they're gonna get caught in a million other ways. Like someone who flies up in the middle of the air and goes pop, 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 and kills everybody on the map. It's like, okay, like we don't need the replay for that. Yeah. We don't need the replay for that. It's the close edge cases where you have really good plays and it's close and people aren't sure. That's when the replays kind of fail and giving you concrete, evidence. I
call them hackies.
The Dill Hero example.
Right? Accusations.
Right, where like some pro player's been accused, right, and everybody's looking at some particular replay, and sometimes it's as small as 5 seconds, and it's like, look at this snap, right, and it's like that's not healthy. That's not a healthy place to be in.
That was what Cypher PK like 3 months ago.
I mean, it isn't just it's every game. I mean, every game has had that happen.
And everybody, like when you have the skills that those guys have, I mean, like I'm 1% of the player of any of those guys, and I have. In my 10,000 hours, that's all on YouTube of me playing Tarkov, I have probably half a dozen examples that's like, that are just lucky, that are unexplainable, other than I thought I heard something and I didn't, but I flicked and got the headshot, and it's like...
What if you were the only judged on that one frame? Like, also, when those things are posted, you're only looking at one thing, not like the window isn't large enough to determine all the times they missed or whatever. Yeah. It's one of the reasons I take issue with, like, we don't not do it, to be clear. Like, you do look at that stuff when you're trying to make a decision on whether or not you should look further. Like, is this what, like, is how many times, just like looking at how many times a particular account has been reported. Like, it gets it into the queue to open a case against it, but like, it doesn't necessarily like, it shouldn't result in an action alone. And I actually think, I don't think any team I've been on has ever like actioned off of only a replay.
So obviously,
unless like, okay, I should preface this. if it's a replay where they're flying around or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wait, Dill Hero's in chat, by the way. I saw.
Hi, Dale. What up, buddy?
Yeah, so that's in a number of cases with notable streamers, and the only reason why I bring up streamers is not because they're special, but because what they do is they shed light on the fact that these things exist. Because when a normal person gets banned, if they get false banned, if they have no way to defend themselves. But when a streamer gets banned while they're cheating, and you can see that somebody submitted on the forums at 1 p.m. a clip that was like totally netcode, they teleported and killed the person, and then they, from their perspective, they just run through the door and shot the guy, and then they find out that he was reported and banned an hour later. It's kind of impossible to deny that it was very likely a manual ban.
yeah. Sure. Okay. Well, you're also talking about a scenario where, like, it sounds like the server is not like these replays are not server sided replays that were like
Not even replays.
There are none.
A clip, a
Twitch
recorded
clip.
I haven't played
Twitch
Tarkov,
or
Somebody pull a Twitch clip or like a
local.
local clip from their own host computer
Sure. Oh, good point. Okay,
of them
so
dying or whatever.
these are different local. Also, these are like competing versions of reality. I would really be reluctant to use local clips. And I'm also not that into using like spectator replays either. We do use them to like kind of direct efforts, but it's hard to use them reliably, especially if a game's not server. You don't have a base truth for like events that have occurred, which in this case, because the server lacks authority.
So I guess my question would be is in the toolkit of people trying to assist with getting cheaters rooted out or whatever, is the idea of having a replay system, because like either games are saying they're adding them, or they're saying that they're going to be, or they added them because of like community pressure or whatever. Like, are they useful for this, or is it more of like a tool to try to suss out, at least on the observer's level, whether or not they should report somebody because, that wasn't actually like somebody cheating. I was just positionally in a crappy spot.
They're not. I mean, I don't personally see a lot of like to anti-cheat, assuming that you've got the layers. They don't add that much value. But this assumes that you've been investing in an anti-cheat for years. Like, there are some things you could do by just having that granularity logged server side, and I'm talking about in the event that the server is authoritative and you do know where every person was at all times, like having this shunted into like an observer system can kind of allow for like, I could download a replay and extract the information from it.
Yeah.
Right?
Demo files. Sure.
Right. And that would make it easier for me to do like types of behavioral anti-cheat analysis. But if you have the other forms of if you have the other layers, it would not be my highest priority. I'm not saying, also, there's like thousands of reasons to want replays. I'm just saying anti-cheat wouldn't be that high in there. I'm not pushing for them on my teams. I'm
I used to be a big proponent. I wanted a replay because I think in a game like Tarkov, one of the things that is different about it is, there's not like a clear objective. There's not like an A and B site like in Valorant or Counter-Strike. And it's like very like open world. You have a lot of dead time. You might not run into anyone for 10 or 20 minutes. And my reasoning for a replay at this point is not necessarily to catch cheaters. It's to force cheaters to play more like real players, which would make cheaters, the impact that they would have on your raid would be a little less. They would be forced to know that someone could watch this VOD. I can't just like sit there and like track this guy through a wall for like 20 minutes and do this and then shoot him, and there's no evidence of me tracking him, but I have backed away from that position over the last couple months after talking to people like you and others. But I guess going kind of back into the game development side of things, how do you rate the importance of thinking of anti-cheat in mind when you're creating a game?
I'm gonna be biased as hell.
Well, this is. I mean, I want to hear like what are the pros and cons.
Higher. I think if you wanted a special, because it's really hard to get stuff off the shelf to address this in post. Like, it's really hard. So like, if you haven't been thinking about it the whole time, you're gonna just get caught with like the bag. You're just gonna be caught with your pants down. It's oh no. And it like, so And I'm not saying like we found like thousands of ways to not build anti-cheat. It was like a very iterative thing, but we got a head start, right? So we figured out all the ways to not do it. So yeah, getting a head start helps. And yeah, especially it does depend a little bit on the genre. Like if you're going to get into the first person shooter game, playing against one egregious aimbotter is rough. Like it pretty much every other person you see immediately after that, you're going to doubt whether or not a particular headshot or an event was legitimate. It just tanks. It can tank player engagement to a degree that isn't seen in other genres. That's one of the reasons that like we went as hard as we did when I was working on Valorant.
Yeah. Go ahead, guys. I don't want to.
Oh, I'll say one thing because I don't know how you guys, by the way, engage in chats and also read like every streamer.
Just ignore them. Just ignore them. No, I'm just
like,
kidding.
You just have ADHD like a
they don't
motherfucker
give
like
us-
me, man. That's all.
If they don't give us money, we just ignore them.
Well, I'm gonna
Yeah.
play to one.
Don't a wall,
where
bitches.
somebody pointing out the value of a replay system in training like AI, and I think I did briefly touch on that. And it's like you can use it to start to carve out anomaly detection with like by supervising, because even if you assume that the number of events you get wrong is kind of ironed out in the aggregate, but like even then you can train those things faster with like explicit anti-cheat. But still, it can be useful in that use case. And I think I also highlighted like when the ESP is rendered, you can kind of make a determination on whether or not there was information present that you didn't know about, or that the player shouldn't have known about. That can be kind of left up. That might be even better for humans to determine than a model to determine, because you might learn something but make no behavioral indication within the game that you know it until like 5 minutes later when you like shoot somebody you shouldn't have known was there. Anyway. Cool.
I got a question about if there's a push in the anti-cheat industry, or at least discussions, or if this has been totally thrown to the side, the idea of like getting into the identity management business, which touches on a couple of different things. I mean, you have like biometrics and whatever, but then you also have like submit your social security number and your license. Yeah. Then there's email and SMS validation, or, entrusted servers. Where does all that fit in? And people just say, oh, why don't they just, make it so that you got to do 2-factor authentication with your phone, as if you can't just get Google phone numbers infinitely,
The VoIP game's hard. Yeah, I mean, a lot. I do. That is definitely like, I'm gonna use the layer analogy again, but that's pretty much where you end up. Once you can detect cheats, you gotta start determining the trust of any person connected to the game, any client. Let's call them clients. So like there's tons of ways that people and nations have approached to doing that. Some developers in some regions can ask that you submit your social security number and can use that to ban you from the game. And those regions benefit from that. It's not the case in every region. And then there's also like, when you get into identity management, you start to get into whether or not you can trust the host. This is where I'll briefly like allude to some of the stuff, but it's like where you can it's like why Vanguard, for example, requires that if you have a TPM module in your own Windows 11, you have it enabled. A lot of this stuff is so like we can start to determine whether or not we can trust a connected client. Because like imagine a heat score that like slowly increases based. Okay, Windows was installed yesterday. It's Windows 7 for some reason. It's all the hardware appeared in the system for the first time 3 seconds ago. That thing has a ton of risk associated with it, right? I might let it play, but there's no reason I should let it join ranked, right? So you start to get in this trust game to kind of increase.
It's got to be a VM, right?
That's what I would. Well, if it's running Vanguard, it's not. But like, right. But so we start to enforce specific requirements on the hosts so that we can both ensure that like they haven't been tampered with in a way that would make it, easy for a cheat to load, but also so that we can determine like that this user hasn't cheated before, especially in a free-to-play game like Valorant or like, but I'm not saying just in free-to-play games too, because like we've already established, cheaters are more than willing to buy another copy of a game. So like you got to think of these things as barriers, and like you got to put as many of them up as you can so that your anti-cheat team stands a chance to reply to the cheats that make it over it. Think of it like, a throttle.
Yeah, you can spoof your email, you can spoof a phone number, you can spoof your hardware IP,
like,
you can spoof your IP address, you can spoof your operating system, you could spoof there's just so many There's just
Yeah,
so many ways
right.
to
But
get
each one
around
of those
all
is
of
another
these
thing
things.
you have to do to cheat again. Which, and I'll take every single one of those every time because it slows. It's slow. Even like the most determined cheaters, like say like they have, especially when you get in. And I admittedly, it's rough. Like games have to be really into the anti-cheat stuff to start getting into this game. I mean, few studios are starting to play it, but like AAA studios have the budgets to do it. But you can start to gate access to game features based on the state's like the trust of that session. Like if you don't have a verified phone number, for example, you can't play ranked or whatever. Different things like that. And I guess the last thing you were talking about hardware fingerprinting and stuff. A lot of that stuff, like that's where like attestation comes in, and like you'll probably start to see products of this shape like start to come out more and more as like the hardware that's necessary to do it, like the penetration in the market is there. Like we can start to accurately determine with limited subterfuge the fingerprint of a particular device, and then you can slowly create a network of like trusted machines and untrusted machines, and it makes it like then the cost to re-enter a game is buying a new piece of hardware.
Yeah. So someone in chat asked like, why can't you just create a new operating system? And that's essentially what consoles do, right? They create their own operating systems with their proprietary hardware, and that's why isn't that kind of why like Xbox or PlayStation is so much more difficult to do a cheat in that environment because they force this
Lockdown as hell,
hardware
right?
attestation. And
Cronus
you can't
Zen,
run
no?
Linux, and you can't run virtual machines, and you can't do all this other stuff. They've got it locked down. Is that true? Is that a good way of thinking of it?
I mean, they do like a lot of the hacking that goes on consoles is at the hardware level, right? Because it's
Cronus Zen.
and
You don't have access to the software unless it's got like a thumb drive port, and like.
Yep. So, well, yeah, and then they have they can do like they have proprietary device IDs and stuff like that. But the thing that's been like made available on Windows is like is the trusted platform and like in hardware attestation based on it, which is impossible to spoof. We even through reinstallations of the operating system, even you can change all the hardware you want, right? But we know that CPU is the one that we banned before. So you have to buy a new one. And that's like, and I'm not even for turning the PC into a console, but I am for like for the environments you want to play games in. For the most competitive ones, we should be able to secure them, and that could just be like could just be like the copy of Windows 11 you use for games, and you can have like your hack box or whatever for like extracurricular activities. But the one you play the game with, we need to be able to enforce the integrity on.
And what do you think about trusted lobbies? Like people say, fine, I don't want to do any of this. I don't want to turn TPM on. I don't want to have like secure boot and all this kind of stuff. And I want to run on Linux. Like, why not allow people to have a split lobby where they go and they have that playground, and then the people that want to be in the trusted lobby and want that high level security?
I genuinely believe that's where it'll go. You'll opt in to a more, and you'll be surprised. Like a lot of players probably would. Oh, this area has no cheats in it. That's the one I think I'll head into that one. And obviously, like it's not like we're not going to secure game developers wouldn't try to secure other modes, but I do think it's going to be opt-in trust measures that like you can even see this like a long time ago with ESA they would require that you like verify yourself to gain access to certain competitive modes. I think we're going to see more of that.
Well, that's iRacing. In order to race in iRacing, you have to provide them a credit card with your real name in it, and your username for iRacing is your first and last name.
Whoa.
Okay,
the company I want to exist.
That's
that
it.
If I had $1 billion, I would start today, and there's issues, so it wouldn't work. But if I could sit down and have an interview with one of these identity management security specialist companies, show them my license, interview them to say that it's me, and have them like lock my account, and all that is like a service like PayPal, where other people integrate it, and all you get when you pay through PayPal is a token. You don't get as the company who's selling the thing, you don't get the credit card information. You don't want the credit card information. I don't need their name or their address or the credit card information. Let PayPal deal with that. If I could handle the validation, it'd be amazing. The only problem there is
well, you take the burden of fraud, I think is I don't know if that's what you're going to say.
Which
But, like-
it's, if you get phished and someone steals your account and then logs in and cheats, if this company, like if Call of Duty and Overwatch and CS:GO and battle state games and Valorant all implement this whole thing, right? They use this service to where they get this trusted additional layer. You're then screwed from all the games because you didn't have a strong enough password on one email, right? So that's like the biggest flaw with that. But I would be willing to have a 20-minute interview and to give my license and everything over to any company. They all have my shit anyway. All the companies have all my information.
And
so
some kind of
Pretty much.
blockchain thing,
I want to get
provided.
something from it.
I think you'll see a lot of competitors if that were that. Like a lot of. Also, when you talk about transactions, like doing your credit, like there's going to be chargebacks, there's going to be account takeovers. It's going to be like if somebody were to gain access to a game under your user that was, you'd be deny listed from everything, like you're saying. But also like transactions, like if somebody used one of your credit cards, that centralized entity you're describing would be responsible for. And I don't think like any one entity is going to want to inherit all that risk. I think is part of the problem. But that's just a guess, because like. We don't see a lot of that today, but maybe in the future, maybe. So.
I mean, if you guys, I can go for days.
I gotta Onepeg. Let's say something. I've been talking.
I'm all yours for at least 45 more minutes.
And I can't transfer.
Veritas is a good guitar player, but can't sing for shit. Well, you told me to say something.
I can sing pretty well, but I'm actually pretty bad at the guitar. I don't know if that helps. Maybe we should get together sometime. That's all I'm saying.
I love you, man. I'm just breaking balls.
Guitar with desync and just prove the point, that it doesn't work, The timing just isn't right.
Yeah, you should play Rocksmith and tell me that you can't play guitar with desync.
I've never played Rocksmith. I don't want to. I don't know. Is it good? I don't know. No, it's not.
Have you?
If they had any songs.
I do have a question. Do you have? I mean, maybe you don't have obviously no specific examples, but have you worked on relatively popular games that had a cheating issue, and then through implementation of X, Y, and Z, you saw the cheating populations drop drastically and stay that way? Or did you find? I mean, obviously it's a constant back and forth battle.
Feature ended all cheating.
But it's kind of
know if there's a hope for Tarkov as well.
Yeah. Like I'm looking at it like let's say Tarkov's player base, I don't 8 to 10% of those people cheat, right? Like obviously the idea is to try and whittle that number down. It might be a constant battle, but you see the trend line decrease through whatever modes, whatever in your history. Have you had those instances occur with games that you've worked in or on where you've seen that happen and continue that trend line to something more manageable? I mean, or has it remained relatively consistent regardless of effort?
I mean, I've seen there is a couple of key moments where technology took a quick leap that prevented a lot of cheats or bots or whatever. A lot of that might be applicable to Tarkov, but I don't want to say for certain that it's like in the beginning in the Bronze Ages, or when you're just getting started, when you don't have the internal anti-cheat, all the tools, everything you need. And this stuff takes a long time to build. And everybody in the community is it takes a lot of passionate people. That's one thing we haven't talked about. Anti-cheat teams are full-time grind dragons. They have to be by nature. It requires this constant iterative effort that never goes away. And it's tough. It wouldn't even be possible if they weren't as committed as the cheaters are. There isn't
for every dozen developers, you've got 1,000.
Yeah, you're
cheaters.
outnumbered, and they ain't got bedtimes, and I got a bedtime. I gotta be in bed. My wife will get mad at me. You know what I mean? They're cheating in a basement somewhere. They don't got nowhere to be. So I'm up against they got more resources. Well, they got more time. So we got to be smart about it. Is all. But anyway, there's a couple of key things. One is making sure the server has authority, which is a big ask, by the way. It sounds so simple. Just make sure the server is authoritative. But this requires a lot of checks to everything that's coming from a client. It takes forever to carve all that out. And then there's a second thing, which is the network layer. We talked about that before. But once you're making a lot of if your network layer isn't locked down, I don't know if Tarkov is or isn't, but a lot of that is where they audit for exploits. They basically they're auditing what the server will take as parameters to any function. and it gives them like a direct endpoint into finding exploits. And it does sound like that might be the case in Tarkov based on what I'm hearing. But I mean, I'm just guessing. So that would help. And then like, but that's like, if you need that stuff for Anticheat to really do its best work. And like they got the work cut out for them, you know. Like it's tough to get to even get there. By the way, like you make a game, you don't even know if it's gonna be. Oh no, the game's big. I guess we got to go back and fix everything because like we were on a tight timeline. Like games come out and like they don't get the advantage once. Like if you're a studio that's making their second or third game, sometimes you got enough resources. You're given time. You can go into R&D and go security first mindset. But a lot of like games that get popular, they've, you know, they didn't have that luxury is the best way to say it.
Yeah, that's
So,
what
like-
Tarkov is. It was a small, inexperienced team that had basically only made browser games before that, and then the game blew up, and now they've got at this point 7 years of tech debt that it's going to be nearly impossible to do a lot of the stuff you're talking about.
It's not
at least.
impossible. It's a lot. It is like you're playing from behind and it's tough.
Well,
Yeah.
like my goal in drawing a lot of attention to this is to make anti-cheat sexy. You know, because before, like, you know, 5
I'm not
years
doing
ago,
a good job. Like I'm not
Yeah,
good.
I know, right? Somebody in chat seems to like you. I read a comment just.
Dude, people in my chat are calling you the Rizzler in here, so I don't know what the hell.
He's got some Riz.
I'm too old
Yeah,
to
but
know
we
what
need-
any
we
of you guys
need-
are talking about.
I
Someone
want-
literally just wrote, "He's so pretty."
we need anti-cheat to have some Riz. Like I think, because I think people, first of all, they simplify it in their mind. They don't realize, okay, so I've talked to one of somebody that you know, I'll put it that way, and he's just like what you said. We message each other like every like 4 hours.
Every
He's
4
always
hours.
in
I know
something.
exactly who it is.
I'll send him a message and be like, dude, I heard this, and he's like, blah, blah, blah. He's got all these freaking threads and screenshots he's sending me and stuff, and it's like 2:00 in the morning. And I'm like, dude, you're crazy, you know? Like there is so much work going on, and I learned that was like, man, people just don't know this. People need to see this, like how much work is going on.
I agree.
And
I mean,
I
that's-
think, yeah,
That's all that's in it for me and showing up, because there's like, you notice like a lot of professionals don't. It's because it does need to remain secretive. A lot of the techniques, it's difficult to talk. It's difficult to say what you can and can't say. But like there, a lot of AAA studios have teams that are huge that are devoted to this problem, and even smaller studios. And I mean, I'm just gonna shill for the grind again. I was on it for like a long time, and they're out there. I mean, I don't know how to make it sexy, but they're working as
yeah,
at
but
least as hard as the cheaters are.
And I think if people realize the work that goes into it, the game studios can kind of bring it into the capitalistic world. Okay, so like, how do I, as a consumer, value a trusted lobby? Should I pay $10 a month? If I'm like, hell, dude, they hired 9 people. They're doing all this stuff. They're checking my games. They're checking, the files. They're updating their stuff. They're expanding their budget on this. I need to be able to go like, yeah, it is worth that. I am going to pay for that. A game that announces that they're going to try to fix this, it's money,
I mean, it is money. And also, we never talked about this before, but Anticheat is an expensive game that doesn't outright generate revenue, right? You don't know how much. Like, if I spend $15 million on an Anticheat, how much do I get back? And you might not get any. What if the game isn't even popular, right? Like you just blew money. So it's hard.
Yeah,
harder to say.
it's
like
a running expense.
And I will
It's
say,
just always
I was
going,
lucky enough to work with developers that were like, whatever it takes. Like, this is the one. This is the win. So, like, that's, but other people, like I said, other game studios don't have that luxury. They can't just be like, spend everything. No idea you have is too big. Go nuts, right?
Yeah, and one of the problems with Tarkov is they don't have reoccurring payments. So you buy the game, and then you just burn cash. You just burn cash. So if you buy the $50 version or the $150 version, at some point you are costing the company money by playing the game to keep the servers on, to keep everything running. Yeah. And so the only solution is to sell more accounts. So like, if Tarkov one day said, you know what, we're going to add and I don't know if this is the right thing to do. I'm just saying, if they add some kind of payment thing, or they add some ability to buy cosmetics or something, like, and they're like, dude, you guys want more quality? You guys want us to fix this? Like,
not a cosmetic in the game. It's just like a cheat detected jacket, and proceeds go
just like the back of the jacket just is like AC rules or something.
Yeah,
it's $1.
Yeah, but it's like it is like a cheat shield that you're able to carry around. That all I'm saying is that, like, people need to understand from a consumer standpoint, like what goes into it, because they have no way of rationalizing like if the game company is doing a good job or whatever, or how they should kind of fund it and view it. And I don't know if Battlestate is, I don't know their financials. They don't really talk about that stuff. You know, they're not a publicly traded company or anything. They don't have to release their quarter earnings and all that. But I imagine it's burning a freaking hole in their pocket trying to solve this. And, you know, this is the future. You know, I mean, games are going to struggle with this, especially the more hardcore and more complicated they get.
It's also hard to know, like, I'll say that they're like shelf products that are meant to address anti-cheat. I think you said one before, like AnyBrain or whatever. But to get the most out of products like that are like supplements, you still need anti-cheat engineers to be able to A/B test them, to confirm their accuracy, to find the cases that like there are false positives or false negatives, and sort out like they still require like sanitization to utilize them. So like there's nothing you can buy that's just like cheating's gone. That doesn't exist yet. I hope maybe one day somebody much smarter than me will invent like Skynet that accurately determines whether or not anybody's cheating at all times. But it doesn't exist. So it's a massive investment. And so yeah, if the financials aren't there, like some product lead somewhere's going to have difficulty signing the check, because it's like it's a protection of long-term value of players. And if Tarkov's monetization value, if there isn't microtransactions, I think given how big of a cash cow those types of monetization models can become, I think it would be difficult to fund a fully fledged anti-cheat effort. I threw out a number earlier, but like anti-cheats are expensive. They're expensive. Teams of that size.
I've seen some numbers, and they were a lot bigger than I thought.
Yeah.
And I'm sure all that stuff is like, I'm sure BattleEye doesn't discuss publicly what they charge any individual company and all that. It's all very private, hush hush. But it was a lot of money. It was a lot of money from what I saw.
I mean, I think even that would dwarf in comparison to an internal anti-cheat effort, which is extremely expensive.
Yeah, because you're
most of the infrastructure you have to develop yourself, which is there's very few pieces of it you can buy.
Well, that's what they had before BattleEye. They had their own homegrown thing that just was insufficient.
Yeah,
they just don't have the expertise.
Yeah,
I don't know if it is. I bet you, like almost every anti-cheater knows what to do. Like they vaguely can be like, okay, we need, but what ends up happening is constraints. Like you don't get to go. I'm just trying to give credit where credit is due. A lot of them grind, and like. The constraints placed on them limit what they're able to do, and a lot of those constraints are like come at you in weird ways. Like I worked with game leadership that was super willing to like I could be like, we're no longer supporting Windows Vista, and they'd be like, how many like what's the percentage of players? And I'd be like 1, and they're like, good riddance. And I'm kidding. Obviously we did analysis to determine like the tenability of upgrading, like, you know, based on the region, but they were willing to take the risks, right? Other anti-cheat developers, probably even the ones working on Tarkov, are like surprisingly limited in what they're able to do, but they probably know what to do. It's just like the business cases end up being honestly the last 5 years of my career have mostly been trying to create business cases for like hardware attestation and minimum operating system requirements, like just proving that these things are not worth it and that players will opt in, like proving on paper that players will opt into a more competitive experience.
And I find Tarkov to be one of the most hardcore like FPS shooters that's ever existed. The performance on the game requires the latest hardware to even get like 60 frames. And the idea that in this environment you couldn't get people to run, you know, like a processor made after like 2015 or something, you know, it's like, come on. Like, I mean, this is the one case where I think you could be more brutal with some of those standards.
Especially considering the uphill battle that they have.
I haven't played Tarkov, but I agree that like for competitive games, I personally as a player would opt in to like the highest competitive standard. I think a lot of highly competitive players would. And maybe that's one of the reasons like these conversations are worth like having finally. I mean, we've been silent for years. There's publishing beats where we've tried to be a little louder, but like it's coming to be like if the players themselves can like, we need this stuff, do this stuff, like that would make my job 2 years ago easier.
And it's one of the things, you know, if I say it, people are like, okay, cool, that's great, man, that's great, go GOAT, you're awesome. But hearing somebody who is in the top of their field, say these things matters more. It matters more, and that's that's why we're doing this.
On a
But
technical level, I'm middle of the pack. I swear to God. I'm just I'm a better orator and I have nicer hair. Like that's about
but for like from a developer standpoint, I would say,
I've been around a minute, sure. Honestly, so I'll say you're asking what they need to do. They need resources. That's probably what they need. I mean, I can kind of point at a few techniques they need to implement at a bare minimum, which they're probably already prioritizing. I bet you.
Time to send an email.
No, but I bet you it's a resource problem, and like they're like not willing to take risks in this area, and I think like it's clear. I don't think it's a mystery to Tarkov that cheating's like a problem for them. They probably have us think every morning.
No, I'm pretty sure they know after Goat's video got like 2.5 million views. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they know it's a problem now.
So speaking of cheaters and some of the downsides of cheating from a personal standpoint, I got boot nuked.
Get owned.
And so
all I have to say about that.
Can you tell me some stories? What are some of the dangers of fucking around with some of this malware essentially that you're intentionally you've got to have some war stories.
Oh, I do. I just can't talk about any of them.
I mean, give me hypotheticals or just things that maybe you haven't been involved in.
I mean, yeah, we've lost host. I mean, that person we were talking about before, which I assume everybody knows now, is the beloved gamer doc. He's probably. I mean, he's tenacious, right? And he works for every community, not just the most popular games, but he's all over the place, and he's got to have a suite of computers at his disposal to test and dump all these cheats. And I mean, he's probably lost more devices than you and I combined. Like, not just because like the developers, determined it was him and did it deliberately, but also like the modifications you have to make to your system to run them aren't super stable sometimes. But yeah, there's that has happened to a lot of. I've had stuff happen where like, God, nope. Can't talk about it. I'm sorry.
But is it? I mean, if you had to rate it on like a safe or not safe scale,
man, here's the thing.
Like, you're basically hopping on some guy's botnet. You're caving portions of your operating system so that like their software can run at an escalated tier. And like in the cheater's mind, it's like anything to cheat. But like they have everything at that point. I've definitely seen like.
Hang on, chat. This fucking alert every time. I can't get it to stop.
Quality control. They don't have a pipeline for confirming that their cheat works. They don't have like a massive like build pipeline for their product, like to the same, like that an anti-cheat might have, and they're trying to do the same techniques.
They have pin-up aggression and hate basically, and vengeance too. So like I've heard stories. This is stories I've heard where you take them down and they just brick like every computer that was running the cheat. I've heard things like that. I know that like the way that they got into my system was using the hardware driver protocol or something exploit, and that's how they were able to get to my hard drives. It was only my M.3 or my M.2.0s. My other hard drives were fine. And they got all three of them in one night and one day. I was like, that's odd. Like, and it was while I was live in Discord too, so that they could watch me go down. So they were not happy with me. And I had all these security people contact me telling me, dude, take your motherboard out of your computer, take everything, lock your network down. And like, of course I've done, I'm not going to talk about what I've done on my front, but I've done a lot of things lately. But they're vengeful too,
This is the stuff that like everybody wants to talk about how profitable cheating is or how profitable cheat development is. I wish more people would talk about how much at risk you're putting yourself and your network. when you
yeah.
install the cheats.
I mean, I
you're-
don't think
you're-
anybody's surprised
Oh,
to find
yeah.
that cheat developers don't have your best interests at heart. Like, I don't
No,
think.
I mean, I don't think that many people actually think about it. They don't think that they have no, it's like when you go to buy meth and you get and the guy just takes your money and then doesn't give you the meth. You don't get to go to the
Well,
cops.
that's called an exit scam. That's one of my favorite. You just like drum up. This was great, by the way. If you got a bit of a reputation, you can release vaporware for cheats. Just one more. You can go have one more go at it. Be like, updates coming, guys. Just keep your subscriptions active.
Yup.
Yeah.
And that's the
Close
thing.
your
How many
Yeah.
people will say,
Come back under a new username. It's all anonymous. Who cares?
yeah, this is undetectable. We've never been detected, even though everybody on the forums was just saying,
Right.
hey, we just got banned for this super expensive cheat, and now
Right.
you're gonna have a sale on the cheat.
It's
Like,
one giant propaganda
you put
battle.
yourself at risk when you cheat, and that's something that more people need to fucking know is how much at risk you are. That will do more for anti-cheating than a lot of the things
getting
that
your
we're
account
talking
banned.
about.
Than just getting your account
We're
banned.
talking about opting into more secure environments. I mean, cheaters are opting out of that deliberately. That's kind of the crux of the argument. Like they're opting into less secure and corrupting those even to load some cheats driver. Like that and that. I mean, one like say for example, you turn off secure boot, you're vulnerable to bootkits. You're loading some guys you're loading someone else's drive. They might be loading a valid driver, doing the old like this one has a valid cert so that I can. But they're probably not. They're probably disabling like cert signing so they can load any driver, which means anything can load any driver.
And they're already
like-
morally questionable.
Right.
And they ask for your 2 forms of ID and your social security number, and they have your credit card information probably.
So
on
they
file.
know where you
your
live.
name, and they know, yeah, they're gonna they could blackmail you. They could do all kinds of crazy
Yeah.
shit. I mean, they could sell all your information to a third party. For
That's
money.
that's how that one dude FOV got found. The guy said he told him he needed to pay him if he was going to keep it from hitting like public whatever, and the dude didn't pay him, so then he got buried, and all of a sudden he stopped streaming because he paid to get kills. And the dude
Yeah,
like
was that,
the
was
dude
that confirmed? I never.
yeah, the
followed
guy
that.
the guy that took the money from him basically was like, yeah, he wouldn't pay me to keep quiet, so yeah.
Yeah. And
mean, there's
you
a
have
lot of-
like the login details, everything.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be surprised to find that most cheaters that are operating at scale collect user information to try to determine what if those players, or like especially if they're selling something that's undetected, they want to know who the players are that are in their ecosystem, is to give them a chance at identifying whether or not it's an anti-cheat developer. So the stuff they're collecting would probably surprise you. Like it's in a lot of cases, it's a lot of data, and a lot of it in very poor formats. I just have to say, as a data scientist, the text formats the flat file formats that anti-cheat or cheaters create to ship data back to themselves is appalling. Like they're
Look
not
at the
like,
UI of the cheats. It makes me want to puke.
yeah, you guys
Dude.
suck. No, I'm kidding.
That last one that they were pushing out to replace ABS is replacing that old the first one that got caught, the replacement one. I was like,
the
this is the most
website.
dude, that was the most sus piece of software just from like the launcher alone. I was like, you guys are just taking your entire lives in your own hands using that shit. Ain't no
You
way.
go to that website, you're gonna get pop-ups that are gonna say Windows support has detected
And
a
then-
thing. Your computer's locked down.
And then dudes are like, "Oh, you're just propagating cheat software. You're advertising for them." I'm like, "Bro, if you install that, like you deserve everything you get."
Yeah, I mean, like you can go to ABS website right now and buy the one that's been shut down for like 2 or 3 weeks, and they'll take your money and they will not give it back to you unless you do like a chargeback or something. I talked to the reseller when stuff went down. I said, "Are you gonna refund everybody?" And he's like, "Yeah, we'll refund everybody that bought it today or yesterday." I was like, "Yeah, but people buy it a week at a time. Like, you better refund it." And then they were allowing people to buy it in advance with it being down, and they just took all the money and ran. I mean, it's like it's just criminal from a customer service, like stealing your money standpoint, not hijacking your computer, and everything else that they do.
I'll say my cheats all had a backdoor ERC botnet, which was the common thing to do in 2008, 2009, or whatever. We used it to issue like remote commands to the people that were cheating. We would use it to like have them all ping a location as a form of like DDoSing, which was you could just kick somebody off the internet for the lulz. But this is all like this is like old stuff, and this is like before we needed to corrupt the whole computer to do it.
Now you just like farm Bitcoin, right? For that.
Yeah.
I would have back then if that had been a thing.
Dude, in like 2012, you wouldn't be working on this shit right now.
No, I mean, I accepted. We did get to the point where we were only accepting payment in Bitcoin because the developers could pretty effectively report your your PayPal accounts to PayPal, and they would close them. So eventually, Bitcoin became the only thing you could utilize. So
Yeah, just keylog them.
a couple of ex cheaters got kind of lucky because we only had Bitcoin wallets, and it was like, oh no, it's why is it worth so much? But yeah, they we were exfiltrating a lot, and we did actually like start issuing remote commands, usually just to DDoS our friends. Like we were kind of dumb, but like we also like at any time could utilize their client to advertise the cheat, and we did. Like the idea that like like I said, they don't have your best interests at heart. And I think somebody also brought up like what's different between an anti-cheat team in the chat. Like they also operate at that level. They're not corrupting Windows to do it, and we have to like we're not in the denial list.
You're actively not doing that or trying not to.
Well, we don't want to crash anything. But also
like,
we have like massive we have massive privacy teams that are like have been spun up around the concerns surrounding like the entire like how like PII and right to be forgotten and all that stuff. So we really don't hold on to anything for any amount of time. We can't. Like we're like also it's too risky. No company wants like they're like honestly companies are like delete everything. Like just so that they don't, if they get caught, they don't want to be in trouble. They don't know what to keep, so it's easier to just delete everything. So yeah, I mean, I guess there is a risk installing cheats. I guess is the don't do it.
Or
if you
So tell us kind of there's this sentiment, okay? This is the sentiment that I get when I read comments and questions, which of course is the best source of information on the internet. But the sentiment is cheaters will always exist. With more technology, they're going to win in the end. Can you kind of give me, if you had to stick your finger up in the wind and lick your finger and kind of feel the wind and kind of give me an idea, do you think all this AI technology, just technology in general,
I'm fine with one
advances in Windows?
I'm fine with one cheater being able to cheat on nobody knowing he's doing it. For the record, most anti-cheat would be fine with that because that means that they're playing within the parameters that other players don't know, and like that means usually that they don't have much of a competitive advantage. They're not selling it, right? It's just them for their own micro aimbot or whatever. That's probably like the lowest priority. The most important thing is that cheating isn't a business. You've seen what happens when that happens. So like that's what anti-cheat teams are trying to prevent. That it isn't marketed.
Large swaths of people.
Correct.
Thousands upon thousands logging in.
My lowest concern is some enterprising kid that like manages to develop a image classification model that kind of updates AIM and keeps it only to him. Like an image classification model is like a lot of cheats are. We should probably cover that actually. That cheats have kind of gone external, but anyway, it's like the tiniest advantage. And it's like they're not selling it to nobody. But by the time it pops into our radar, like it's such a low priority, right? But that's the thing that we take the action the slowest on. It's actually the thing that typically it's not that anti-cheat teams don't care. It's just the lowest risk, or it has the lowest severity.
Yeah,
so
and
like,
I'm in that same boat as a player. I don't know how Onepeg and Veritas feel, but I'm in the same boat. I would rather you go after the big businesses with 20,000, 30,000 people cheating at one time.
Also, anti-cheaters are upset when like anybody gets to make money off of a cheat. Like it's like them, why not me? And then they just
when you take out like let's say like you detect a 1,500 player group or whatever, and like you hit the button, like somebody like, is there like a ceremony where you're like, all right, here we go, like, and then you blast them, and then you guys like walk around like high five each other, like you just got a huge drug bust?
Hell yeah! Yeah, I mean we have for the ceremonious stuff, like when you finally get like a cheat that's been playing a game too long. That stuff gets rarer when you're in the late game. Not to like the iteration gets so quick that like you don't see cheats of that size where that kind of thing happens. But when it does come up, we do make a bit of a ceremony out of it. Like pre-COVID, we would bought a USB button and like had our boss come over and hit it or what. It's like whoa, it's been yeah. I mean like they're anti-cheaters are people too. Obviously they have fun.
You mentioned
Go ahead.
You mentioned cheating as a business. One of the biggest things in that's been discussed in the world of Tarkov is
All right, they're for the guitar. Somebody's asking about these are not for show, and I play fingerstyle.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
I have fake nails.
Um,
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to
okay,
cut
yeah,
you
sorry. So you mentioned cheating as a business. One of the things in Tarkov that's discussed a lot and controversial and problematic to whatever degree is real money trading. Either in terms of people cheating to be able to farm items, a game that has an economy, like global economy like Tarkov, to be able to farm the items and sell the items, or carrying other players, as in, I'm going to go and kill everybody and I'm going to tell you where all the good stuff is. You just follow me around. I wonder what kind of, what's the relationship from Anticheat to those kinds of behaviors, if there is a relationship?
We did. I mean, I don't want to say we. It typically does end up in the anti-cheat purview once you've matured as a team. The things start to be ways. Look, like I said, cheaters will do anything to cheat. The way that when you're accurately detecting all cheats, that'll start to be queuing with a cheater until they're banned to rank up, right? So you end up having to find those little pockets that players are trying to eke out value in. I'm referring to duo queuing in a game where you partner with a cheater. We had to determine the amount of ranked gain that you had gained from playing with one. There's actually tweets and stuff about this, so it is a topic we can talk about. Riot, when I worked they took that really seriously, that particular type of offense. So we were able to take action on that. You would pay a cheater to cheat for you, that kind of thing. It's and then you also end up with, I don't know if this is part of your question, but paying somebody to play for you.
Or
we saw some of that. Boostings.
A boosting service, yeah.
Yeah. Way back at the beginning, way back in my career, I tried to develop some tech using the hardware fingerprinting to determine the likelihood that a player had shared their account. Could you imagine how much easier that would be if people had to attest their hardware? Just saying. Yeah. So anyway, you end up with cursory markets that are ways to use cheats that are detected, because most of them aren't. So a lot of that is join me, I'll show you where everything is, give me a $5, that kind of thing. In Tarkov, I guess, because I'm assuming there's mats now. It's surprising how little I know about this game.
There's loot.
There's loot. Okay.
Tarkov is extremely lucrative. Every cheat dev that I have had the pleasure of interacting with has said it's been the most lucrative thing to make money off of as a cheat developer or somebody that sells for money of any game that they have ever bothered dealing in or with, because of the sense of loss and the perception of value because of that sense of loss.
And there's no ranked lobby. There's no skill-based lobby. So you
no SPMM.
Everybody. So it's not like you work your way up in skill value. You're always in the same lobby with everybody. It's like an MMO kind of in that sense.
For the most part, if you die in this game, everything that you get killed with is lootable. So if you find really valuable stuff, relatively rare stuff, and you die with it, somebody else can take it off your corpse.
Gotcha. Yeah, dude. Okay, so cheating in that game would be
it's outrageous. Yeah.
It's not just isolated to one game. It affects loot out of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Cycle Frontier, which is a similar kind of game, they're starting to return loot back to the person when they ban a cheater, and they log it all and they let you know. And I think Tarkov is going to implement a system where you get notified, so you're not even notified now when a cheater gets banned in one of your lobbies. But if they can do some back end work and return stuff, that will be a step in it's kind of like returning rank.
I swear to God, you were talking to somebody on the side. That's because you sound like a person I know. Yes. So eventually, when we talk about fruit of the poisonous tree, people that find ways to cheat with cheaters that are detected, you have to find a way to undo that damage. So return items to players who had them taken by a cheater. Return rank to players who lost it to a cheater. Rollbacks is basically the and that's but that's once you have the ability to detect cheating. We're talking way into the future for some teams. But yes, that is that was what I was having to get into towards the Riot's been at it for 10 years. That was kind of what we were getting into the spot where we could detect cheats. We knew how to, we were fast. We were the best at, we could detect, not all of them were instant, some, but the time to detection was really low. So all the behaviors are just that partnering with a cheater or trying to find ways to get value out of an account that will be detected, that was 99% of our our day to day. Boosting, busing is like when you queue with a cheater, or trying to develop systems that allowed us to remove the damage that a cheat had done. And yeah, that's like I said.
On this topic, I want to quickly read a tweet that had 8.6 million views on this tweet, and I just want to see your reaction, what you think to this.
Okay.
Imagine trying to extract with an item you discovered worth $100,000 on the blockchain. Think about the entertainment value as a viewer, let alone the player. A new PvP experience is upon us.
What?
So
Read
is
it
that,
again.
I think are
I
you
know
referring to the
this
idea of, like,
tweet.
NFTs, like there's NFTs.
It's Dr. Disrespect.
Yeah.
It's his game that is.
He's making a game
ostensibly-
called Dead Drop.
It's an extraction looter shooter where there's some amount of NFT related
value.
Items
yes.
have value on the blockchain as NFTs in some cases, is
So
what
I'm
he's been
sure-
pushing.
So I guess what I want to know is, does that just make you cringe internally?
For what? Like
As-
the idea that items
Like,
have
how do you
value?
ensure
No,
that
no.
someone with that item wouldn't get clapped by a cheater and
multiplayer
have it taken?
A multiplayer
Oh.
PvP game where your success is potentially worth. Now, I don't think something like that would ever actually be worth
No.
$100,000.
But even if it's
Well,
$100,
you've raised the stakes of coming across the cheat. I mean, you said it best, but you've raised the stakes of coming across a cheater. So I'd hope any initiative like that. Also, even with a really low time to detection, if you don't ship with like the ability to detect and the ability to roll that back, nobody's going to invest any money in those items. Like, I would not feel safe having I would not feel safe having invested in an item that I could have taken from me by somebody cheating.
yeah.
Or like
you
having a
create such
reward like
perverse
that
incentive.
snatched from you on the way out or something. Like, otherwise you would have won with it, but then, like, you know, cheater Billy, like in between games of beer pong, decided that he was going to snipe you from across the map and take your cash because, like, they're not going to give a shit. Like, I just made $100,000. Fuck them.
I mean, I think
he can go buy Legos or something with it, you know?
when like I would imagine that would be reflected in the price of the item, like, or the price of the NFT, because it would, like, the trust you have in that as a monetary vehicle would be decreased.
Well, yeah. So I would argue,
Right.
in a system where cheaters are sniping these things, they're not going to be worth ever that much money, because no one, it's never going to have that value because of how the market's tainted by,
Like, would you-
people cheating.
In that case, would you focus more? I mean, obviously you would need the cheat detection, but in terms of enforcement, would you focus more on making sure that the accuracy of the ability to roll something back would be like priority, like 1 or like 1A if detection is 1?
Can you roll it back if it's truly a blockchain, like, and it's distributed the way that
I don't know. Maybe like you'd have to delay the reward, right? Like, it would have to go into a queue for verification or something. Like, what else are you going to do? Like, other than just not fucking doing it, because that's really the answer. Because I think the idea of doing something like this is like completely asinine, because you just created the most profitable cheating like endeavor ever known to man.
Well, I don't know if it's like it's profitable to cheaters, but I honestly think if cheating was pervasive, it would just drive the value down. But if you, like, assuming that it is an NFT and that the value is in the ledger for them is decentralized, can you roll them back?
Well, that's I don't know.
That's
what I mean.
a separate.
That's an
Like,
entirely
cash
separate
out
discussion,
quickly.
right?
If they
Yeah.
cash out that
Well, that's what
hour,
I mean. Like,
what are you gonna do?
if it's not immediately rewarded and it's just like,
I guess you'll have
you know,
to
a
get into
placeholder
hardware.
or something.
I
Hardware attestation, yeah.
trusting devices. Yeah. I mean, that's what you got. I mean, you have to get into the preemptive game. You got to know you can trust anybody that's engaging, like entering the network or entering the that can buy or acquire these items. I don't think you can do it in post. Like, a lot of detection products, like the ones that I've worked on, operate on a delay. They wouldn't be sufficient to enforce, like, to have sufficient integrity in the game to make those items retain their value. Like, if you were to convert them to a fiat currency.
So quickly, you kind of brought this up earlier. There was a video recently where a guy is talking about image based, you know, you refer to it as, like, basically it's not on your computer. It's external, and it uses the image on your screen, and you can use AI to make your aim better and blah, blah, blah. And then the solution is some kind of AI, video. We kind of talked about the companies, trying to do that right now. Did you want to talk about that? What do you think about the future of that?
What AI? I mean, like what AI in what capacity? It wasn't specific enough.
So there was the Any Brain, and then there's Waldo, whatever it's called.
I don't know. Like I said, the high level is that I think they're supplements to existing anti-cheats. That's my personal view on them today. Like maybe one day they'll take off and perfectly from like they'll be. One of the things I'm worried about is like you have to get as close to the person to fingerprint them behaviorally as you can, and eventually that requires that like either you're sending a ton of telemetry to the server and then validating it, or you're on the host itself. And if you're on the host itself, cheaters are going to have their way with whatever way you're trying to exfiltrate anything. You'll be vulnerable to replay attacks. They might black hole your traffic. They might like just not bother submitting inputs in the way that you consider typical. They'll stop using a keyboard and mouse. They'll start submitting controller input. Maybe they'll start using bananas like some of those other kids do. Like they're going to start changing the way they like, but like they haven't been around enough to know where their endpoint's going to sit to egress the behavior, the closest thing you can get to the player. Right. And I don't know, there's going to need to be some maturity there to actually get the information in a way that you can rely upon, because that's going to get attacked. And then you're going to have a way. And even if it was perfect, you'd still need evidence to take action in a lot of, you can't ban, like you're not compelled to do business with people. Like you don't have to like allow a person to play a game, but you can't like, you can't, like you wouldn't have the proof necessary to take action on pros or to defend yourself if like in a consumer court in a some of the regions that have them could compel you to enter court. Like it wasn't me. You would need proof of that. Like I didn't cheat. You need proof that they did. And like I don't think a model predicting that you did is sufficient evidence in those cases yet. But it's great stuff. Like it kind of allows you to prioritize your efforts on demographics of accounts, because it can start to like a lot of like what AI is typically used for is like getting eyes on the right stuff that's what we used it for.
That's where a lot of those technologies are right now anyway. Like people when they use AI generated art or like stuff like Midjourney or Chat GPT, a lot of it is, at least currently, supplemental. People will generate something and then Photoshop it, or they'll use AI to generate like an email and then they'll go through and edit it. I think that's like what you were talking about. It would be supplemental until some future point where it's more robust and reliable.
ChatGPT to like extend your I mean, what I use it for is to
inspiration,
massive search inspiration. No, I'll throw articles into it and get them to summarize. I don't got time for this. Like it's great for when it's used to supplement something, but it's not quite to the, and maybe it'll be there someday. I'm not like against AI or anything. It's just not, in my experiences so far, it is not there yet. Both because of the burden of proof placed on a developer when they suspend an account, and also because when you go to train these things, you often need anti-cheats anyway, so it doesn't eliminate the need for one. So if you're gonna bother, aren't you going to use you're gonna use like the explicit information from it also? And then finally, the like trying to get as close as you can. Like a lot of those products haven't quite sorted out how they're going to apply to everything in a way that doesn't allow them to be attacked. Because if you're putting code on a cheater's machine, it's gonna get fucked with. Like and I don't think some of those products are in the maturity where they're like realizing that. And that's for the peripheral based ones. When you're talking about just screen reading stuff, I genuinely don't believe there's enough information there to do it yet.
Yeah. They're going as far to say that they can watch your gameplay and ban you within 5 minutes if you're cheating.
Blow my mind.
And have all this data on you.
I want to know the recall. I want to know like how many cheats they do that.
Yeah, well, I mean,
we had 30% of cheating with no false positives within like 5 minutes. That might be. But if they're saying all cheaters,
no. Here's the thing.
That'd be bullshit.
No way. And it gets better. They say that they can have all this data on you, and if you go create a new account, they'll be able to have a fingerprint of you and ban you when you go to create another account, because they're going to know it's you based on the data matching of how you play the game.
Wouldn't they need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours?
Listen, I'm not making this. I'm not making this shit up. So there is a video that is going around, and I'm actually in the video being interviewed about something unrelated. So I'm a little salty. So that's why I'm kind of bringing it up. But I think the video was not portrayed as that was what was going to be talked about. So I'm a little salty. But I do I do think that maybe someday, 20 years from now, some of this stuff will be reality, just like everything we thought about 20 years ago wasn't
No,
possible.
a year from now, it's not going to.
I just think the video was portrayed as this is like right around the corner and this is the solution and all that. And so,
I genuinely don't think it is. I mean, I think it'll start to be able to take action on accounts. Like it will probably with 100%, but like the recall is going to be really low. It'll be like the most egregious cheating, which again
it would be like New World bots, you know, they're running around doing like chopping trees down. Like that kind of stuff to me is like, that's like low hanging fruit. I think, yeah, you can look at that and be like, that's a bot behavior. But yeah,
Well,
like
yeah,
high level cheating, you know.
bots are an application of models where you can usually get really high recall because you got a big old window to look at. The behavior doesn't. You're not forced to take action quickly. Like you don't need to get a cheater out of the game. A bot is like, oh, I saw it, I reported it or whatever. The severity of the behavior is so low that you can get a good window. And again, with a larger window, your accuracies increase sufficiently. So in my experience, modeling is probably one of the key ways we've tackled bots. It's also really, you know, you got to like keep them up to date. There's drift and stuff, but it's one of the key ways that you can address botting. It's far harder to address like players taking specific actions with automation.
This ties back
like, real hard.
This ties back to something I wanted to ask earlier. I forgot about. As this technology progresses, it's going to be imperfect, which means just like with Tarkov and the manual bans, you know, that definitely ensue or have ensued.
How do you guys get on stream and talk for like 3? My mouth is dry. Like,
I'm ready to go to bed. I'm just waiting.
You gotta go for 14 hours straight, 6 days a week, my dude. That's
if you're not streaming 36 hours a day every day, you're a casual.
People wonder why sometimes it's hard for me to get to the point and spit it out. It's a lot of times because I'm just fucking tired. But so
I've been at it for 2 hours. But anyway, sorry, clear your thought.
So there's gonna be false bans in all kinds of different games and platforms, and the fact of the matter is that at least in the case of BattlEye and Tarkov, it's notorious for false bans again, and having like zero appeals process. You end up in an email black hole where nobody responds to your emails. You spend $150 on a game that you were potentially false banned on. Is there anything anybody can do to protect or defend themselves against false banning? Like, or are you just at the whim?
Just to give the developer's perspective, every cheater says they didn't cheat. So well, like every time,
absolutely.
Like, and they
but when you have streamers that we know weren't cheating because we know why they were cheated, and the developers admit that they were falsely banned as a part of ban waves that might have included hundreds or thousands of people. There's no way that you can tell me that there weren't false bans that weren't cheaters that, I know, you know what I mean? That weren't
Stop
streamers.
yelling at me. I didn't do it. I know you're upset about it. There's not really, I'm like, no, there's not a way to protect yourself. I've falsely banned people. It took me a while to get good. Like, I mean, Tarkov is kind of in its infancy in the anti-cheat way, in the ways that, like, again, they didn't have the advantage of being like a massive like having money and getting to throw it at the problem. Prefacing the game with like, we're building the best anti-cheat or whatever, you know. Like
they actively avoided it until they had no choice.
Yeah, they're like trying to attach wings to the plane, and it's mid-flight, you know. Like they got resource, and also they got a budget, and it doesn't sound like there's microtransactions fueling that budget. So like, think about it. I mean, I'm not saying like empathize with, you know, but like I'm not gonna bash what I know is going on behind the scenes. It's probably a very stressed person that is like managed to get a model in the test set that like identifies like and you know, they're trying to do the best they can. But no, that's a very loaded question. What can you do to defend yourself against false positives? Nothing really.
So I mean, like I know of at least one case where somebody who wasn't a streamer, then the only reason why, again, streamers is relevant is because you have
false positives. I have a few. Enable MFA. If a service has MFA, enable it so that somebody can't take your account and you don't have to claim that your brother did it or whatever.
That's multi-factor authentication.
MFA, 2FA. Yes. Very important. Like, you should have this on every service you have, to be clear. If it's available to you, use it. I think the adoption rates are also abysmal. On every game I've worked on, it's so hard to give. It could be like, we'll immediately make you diamond. You just please enable it, and nobody will. Like the idea of having to open a browser or
Well,
like
complete your Bitcoin farm.
to do that, but also like a lot of false positives come about as a result of like cheating in other games, and so you could just not cheat in other games. Like that's something you could do. This is again in my experience, and also like yeah, those are probably the main two.
Well, and a little history, like I created a video a long time ago where I caught a friend cheating, and I kind of did like a video on how I did that. And I, for like the next year, got like 15 emails a day of people who weren't cheating. And half the time I would go to their profile and I go on their Twitch. I'm like, you're streaming your cheats. Like I had one yesterday. At the beginning of this stream, I looked into this guy's Twitch. By the way, he deleted all his VODs after I started talking about it, but I downloaded everything and I pulled it up and it's like, he's using ESP. It's like, and so what's tough is like, there's a handful of people that weren't cheating and it really sucks. I was on the end of that as well because I had a motherboard that didn't report unique serial numbers. So
I remember when you
hardware ban.
DM'd me about that forever ago.
My serial number matched somebody who was using the same motherboard and it was like thousands of us. So, they were able to figure it out, but it just sucks. And I think it's kind of like a necessary evil at some point. Speaking of that, I've got a little birdie in my ear who really wants to ask you about DMA hardware detection. The cheaters, a lot of cheaters in Tarkov use DMA devices, which for you lay people that aren't fancy with all this lingo, they're a separate device running on another computer that intercepts the memory and is able to do stuff off your computer.
The vector, there is an article on this but okay, it's DMA refers to direct memory, and what they're doing is they're utilizing a specialized piece of hardware to read the physical memory of the device and exfiltrate it to another machine for post-processing. They usually use this to do like ESPs. Sometimes they can do aimbots too because they can get the positional data of the character and issue. But oftentimes it's accompanied to do that. It's like they'll use like an Arduino or something to submit peripheral input back to the host that's playing the game. But like anyway,
for Tarkov, it's radar is the common one.
Yeah. So they're basically egressing all of the machine's memory, and then they have a process on another machine that's combing it to determine where the structures in memory are that contain player positions, and then they're probably on that machine itself. Do they have like a web server or something? Is that the like they probably point their browser at a server that thing's hosting to render a radar on another monitor or something.
Usually on a second
right?
PC. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, I'll just say it's tough to I mean, I think I say this in the thing, but we just straight hired the guy that had a technique to detect it. Like it's tough because like, when you get into the hardware stuff, the number of people that have the I don't know the first thing about how to detect it. So I found a guy smarter than me that could. But again, I had the budget to do that. So
yeah. Wait. So are you saying? Because man, the whole idea of thinking that you could have, let's say, a second PC that's like man in the middle, grabbing the network packets, decrypting it, and then displaying on a second PC and a browser a minimap with dots. How the hell, like that to me seems undetectable, just fundamentally, unless you like, seems to me impossible.
I can't talk about how, but obviously there's like, there are ways to prevent this,
to prevent it. Like encryption and all kinds of others. Okay, but not. Oh, okay.
There's also, I mean, like this is something that I can't even get into the techniques for because one, like I don't have the technical background to do it, but also like it's highly proprietary. But like
he can't tell you.
Okay, so what do you think about the fact that the cheat that I used in Tarkov, they required me to uninstall any Riot game and not have Vanguard running for it to work? What's going on there? Why do I have to uninstall Vanguard to run an EFT cheat in a game that's a completely different game?
That's a good question. So like, I mean, there is a chance that they're worried. I mean, I doubt this is it. They're probably worried that like Vanguard could detect it, but like, admittedly, you'd have to be. And there is.
I think it doesn't let it start.
I don't know if it detects it, but I think it doesn't work. Like it just won't run.
It's a good question. I can only guess. I mean, like Vanguard does prevent certain things from loading, especially if it's a driver that doesn't have a valid cert. And so if you have Vanguard installed, we might prevent that from happening. We here being Riot. I don't work there anymore, but yeah, they might prevent that from happening.
Yeah. And the one thing that's different about Vanguard's cheat is like with, you can call them less invasive cheats, however you want to put it. You can reboot the computer essentially and get ahead of it. And this is my dumb way of interpreting it. So correct me how I'm thinking of this wrong, but you could reboot the computer and get ahead of the cheat where Vanguard's is like, no, we're going to be there at all times.
Well, that gets into the argument about why we load, like, I gotta stop saying we. It's been a while. Okay, well, that's like a lot anti-cheats that do load first, like load when the system does, are trying to make sure that they're the first thing there, so that they can confirm like all the system variables that, like, one of which happens to be like confirming that this, like, secure boot is on, that we can trust that there isn't, like, that a bootkit, that there isn't a bootkit. So yeah, like, getting there first is important because we can, like, look at the time that we loaded and, like, when the operating system did, and, like, make sure that nothing else got in between us. That's like anti-cheats that take that, and honestly, that's like not like, I'd be surprised to find that a lot of studios had the appetite for that type of thing, like loading on demand, or loading on boot instead of on demand. But yeah, it's trying to give you the best shot, and I'm sorry for all the things I can't say and how upset everybody is, but like, it's to give you the best shot at, like, identifying whether or not the system has been tampered with. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of ways to do that I can't talk about, but loading on boot gives us the best shot at doing it.
So we have kept you for a long period of time. I could still I could talk to you for like another 5 hours, but the life must go on. Like Veritas, Onepeg, why don't you throw, if you have anything you want to ask, go ahead. And then Phil, like, if there's anything that you just, like, we haven't covered that's like you want to clear up about anti-cheat stuff, this is your chance. Have at it.
No, I'm not gonna add anything.
V, go first, man.
I mean,
Hi, Ames. Thank you for the raid. I'm sorry. We're still mid-interview.
It's a problem. It's expensive to solve. You know, like, like I say, like, the previous studios I worked at.
We're talking to the former head of the studio that was developing Vanguard for Valorant.
Where we were, like,
he was the head of the team for Valorant that developed the Vanguard anti-cheat.
The level that we needed for anti-cheat to even start to have an impact. It's like a massive tiered problem. And
thanks for coming by. Ames, I love your face. Thank you.
Thinking it's like, just stop all cheating or something. It's so much larger than that. It affects everything. You got to make sure, like, the server has authority. You got to, like, we had to get into the host anti-cheat game to make sure that we had a shot at detecting things that were trying to manipulate the client, or were trying to read the screen, or were trying to submit inputs. Like, we had to get in all that. And even still, like, there's still ways that players can eke value out of the one day they get to cheat. And so it's like, honestly, I think cheaters are always going to cheat. And, like, we talked about where everything's going, but it honestly is going towards a place where we have to start to trust the hardware that plays the game. Similar to consoles, like, we have to start to, like, it's going to be a game of trust. To, like, often, like, gated, like, joining rank, like, joining like competitive modes require these settings, you know, like joining the upper echelon of play requires all of these settings. Like, joining tournaments requires even more. Like, it's the only thing that can, like, let us actually know for a fact that a person isn't cheating before they play. Because otherwise, we're basically just we're on like a 2-day delay to determine whether or not any particular user cheated. We can't secure a tournament completely, which means we're always vulnerable to, like, some person managing to get access to somebody else's account, playing as them in a remote tournament, and then just having their way, cheating and just making a spectacle of it, right? So the only way you have a shot at, like, preventing those types of things is I mean, the person in your ear is hardware attestation, but it's true. It's like, we have to start to have the ability to trust the session.
Like, cheaters on LAN having their cheats in the mice, bringing the mice with, like, software loaded onto them. I think that was a CS:GO thing back in the day.
Yeah, it was. I mean, well, that's just a way to get their stuff into the machines they don't own. But yeah, that was a vector. Yeah, and yeah, also, I mean, you know, we talked a lot about hardware stuff, the hardware cheats, and I worked with, like, some of the best of the best. That's, like, why, like, I'm here because like, I happened to be the product lead for a while of one of the best anti-cheats or whatever. But, like, that was just a reflection of, like, how hard all the people on it worked. So I'm just gonna shout out to, like, you know, I'll give the ones that have handles, but, like, GamerDoc, EverDocs. I'm sure you've heard of a couple of them in your DMs, but there was, like, and RIOT K3O. Everybody, like, really put a lot of they worked harder than like as hard as cheaters, and that was like the way we were able to push the envelope that way. And I don't think some companies can afford it, so that's why you don't. That's why there ends up being a little bit of a delta. Anyway, I hope that was like three. I didn't. That wasn't well rehearsed, but there you go. There's three things.
No, this has been amazing.
I've got one last question real quick.
Sure.
Does reporting suspicious players matter? A, and B, should there be a stigma to reporting somebody you're suspicious of, even though there's a chance that they might be legitimate? Like, how do you feel about the role of reporting suspicious players?
It's it's super valuable. Well, like I said, it's similar to anomaly detection, and it allows us to like direct our, like, as anti-cheat engineers, we can direct our focus towards the things that affect players the most. And also, like, you know, there's a lot of noise. I will say that they're not that accurate, but in the aggregate, they can direct you towards problems. And like I've done pieces on like how accurate players are based on how long they've played the game and how highly rated they are, and we can trust certain reports more than others. And once we get to the state where we can estimate the value of any particular report, and you can get there when you're resourced properly and you got like 7 data scientists at your disposal, you can get to the point where you can eke you can prioritize reports based on who's making them. Or the demographic that's making them. And I've been in those situations, and it's a massive boon in those. It's a massive boon when you can do it. But there's a lot of noise, and it takes work to use everything. There's no one. I hope that if I've rambled enough, I hope the one thing is like there's no smoking gun. You need everything, and fewer resource to have everything. So when you're running lean, you gotta like take the smallest wins, like the obvious things.
And this is the consistent thing that I've heard across the board of everyone I've talked to. You know, the cycle guys refer to the cheese method of like having multiple layers, and there's like holes in every single slice, but you line them all up, and eventually the cheese is not going to get through.
Everything
you know?
gets through. I mean, I think of it as in fences. Like, you know, there's like making sure. But I do like. Sorry to shill one more time for hardware attestation. It is evolving into a like how much can you trust this machine and this person that's playing this game, and I think that's the only way it's going to be sustainable. Because I'll just say it's getting too expensive, and anti-cheaters themselves are getting too expensive, and I mean, like it's not sustainable. You can't keep attacking it as this like detection only problem.
Yeah,
I do think that timeline is limited, because even with all the resources at my disposal, and I do think I had the most of them, I was running out of things to like. I was running out of ways to reply to reply at the speed necessary on only operating in post, like waiting for the crime to happen. So like the only place to go, at least in my perspective, is the pre-crime division, or in this case, hardware attestation.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys. To find everybody, we've got Veritas. Of course, you can find him on YouTube and Twitch. Onepeg up in the top right. You can find him on YouTube and Twitch. I was bad about not putting names on here. And Phil, the only guy without a beard, you can find him on the dark web selling Tarkov cheats.
Yep. 30 grand the last time I heard.
You can look him up. He's legit. And I'm so glad to have all of you guys on. I thought this was a great conversation. And yeah, I hope we kind of open the can of worms on this a little bit and let people talk about this in a more open way. And I really think it's empowering. I think knowledge is power. And I hope things move forward for Tarkov, but just gaming in general. You know, it's in a rough spot right now with a lot of games with cheating. And I think, you know, not talking about it, I don't think is going to help.
Dude, my brain is so full right now. I'm just saying.
I couldn't. I hope
so
we can
full.
get up next time. I'm sorry you had to dig at the bottom of the barrel just for me. I am glad some of this stuff is getting out there. Like a lot of it has to come. A lot of this demand has to come from the players, like because it has to be made known to studios that this is what they want. So that, I mean, this sounds kind of draconian, but we got to be able to start to enforce some of this stuff to because it, like I said, that timeline's shrinking, and yeah. So it's good that we're starting to have the conversation.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
Good, Phil.
All right, gentlemen. I'm going to go ahead and close it out.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
You guys have a great rest of your night. And I'll talk to my chat a little bit. But thank you so much. Cheers.
Thanks, boys. See you.